Recording in progress.
Good morning. Welcome to the September 27, 2023 edition of the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission hearing. Please join me for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Villalobos, will you please make the television coverage announcement and then conduct the roll call?
Thank you, Chair Park, and good morning to the Commission. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County and Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV, Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, San Maria, and Orca areas. Rebroadcasts of Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays after 5 p.m. on CSB TV, Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website and will be available for download in a day or two. Would you like me to move on to the roll call?
Yes, please.
All right. Great. Commissioner Cooney.
Here.
Commissioner Bradley. Commissioner Farini.
Here.
Commissioner Martinez.
Here.
And Chair Park.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's go ahead with our agenda status report, Mr. Wilson, and then you can move on to the projection report if you don't mind.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, there's only one item on our standard agenda, which is a continuation of our last hearing on the comprehensive plan and ordinances related to the Recreation Master Plan. And so today is the second meeting for that, and staff is ready to present on that today. So that's the only item on the standard agenda, and I'll move to the projection report.
Okay. Our
next hearing is going to be next Wednesday, which is October 4th. To remind the Commission, we're going to be in Santa Barbara. Actually, we're going to be in Goleta. So we're going to be at the Santa Barbara County or Employee County Retirement Services. Anyway, it's a big long name and I've got it all messed up. But anyway, SB Sears. We'll be at that location on next Wednesday. So, Goleta. We do have an address.
It's on the agenda.
Thank you.
It's on the agenda for the record. So next Wednesday, we'll be in Goleta at the SB Sears office location. So we'll be holding the hearing down there. There's one item on that agenda, which is the ordinance amendment package from Long Range Planning. So that's going to be next Wednesday, October 4th. And then following that, then following Wednesday is October 11th. We only have one item scheduled for that, and that's a appeal of a homestay, and that's back here in Santa Maria. And then following that, our next hearing is October 25th. And that's again here in Santa Maria, and that is an appeal of a cannabis operation on the Lompoc area. Terra Firma. And then on November 1st, we will be returning back to Santa Barbara. And there's one item on that agenda right now, which is an amendment to Development Code. It says November 1st. So beginning in November, we're going to be switching locations due to upgrades in this hearing room. So our hearings will be moving down to Santa Barbara. So the remainder of us will have the opportunity to be driving to Santa Barbara while the upgrades are being made. So November 8th, we have the Agriculture Enterprise Ordinance scheduled, and then that's in Santa Barbara as well. And then following that, there would be a little break due to Thanksgiving holidays, and then on December 6th, we don't have anything forecasted at this time, or December 13th. However, Speaking with, we'll update the projection report, but speaking with Director Plowman and Deputy Director Tuttle and Chair Park, we will be scheduling some hearings at the end of the year related to the housing element and bringing that to the commission. So that isn't reflected on the projection report at this time, but on our next hearing, that will be showing up on the projection report. And maybe Mr. Villalobos has some of those dates.
Sorry, no, I have not had a conversation with Long Range Planning yet on that. But I just wanted to just go back to Commissioner Bridley's question. So the address for next week's hearing is at 130 Robin Hill Road, Suite 100. So it's right behind the Residence Inn, like right behind it.
Oh, okay.
And there's parking there
Ample.
and a flag in the room that somebody can point me to?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, I think it-
All right.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, so the housing element, we're all anxious for this. I mean, I guess the advice I'm hearing today is we should just block out December 6, 13, and anyway, right? I mean, are we thinking that we are going to have these hearings by the end of the year, right?
Let me, well, go ahead. Do you want to answer or shall I answer?
So
Might be different answers.
yeah, actually, from November and December, we're looking at potentially having a special hearing for the housing element. I think we had looked at maybe the 13th, which is a Monday, November 13th, as a special hearing to have. Right now, we're in a little bit of a holding pattern, waiting for comments from the state. But depending on where that goes, when we get those, the idea is potentially we might alternate the Ag Enterprise Ordinance off of the 8th and move it to maybe a special hearing date, or depending on how and when we get the comments back from the state, have hearings on the housing element. So we're looking at a special hearing around that first 2 weeks of November, and we targeted maybe potentially November 13th, which is a Monday.
Okay. I was thinking that we were going to have 1 or 2 hearings. Do we even know?
On the housing element, clearly we won't know till we get there, but what we're going to try to do, or the aim, the hope, is that it can be done in one day, because there's some urgency with it. And we all need to remember that the rezone project is a separate project. So the housing element will be basically going over policies, the element itself. So the hope is to do it in one day. And like Mr. Wilson said, if we get feedback from the state early enough, we'd hold it on the 8th and we'd kick the Ag Enterprise Ordinance further back, because just the one has priority over the other in terms of timing.
Sure.
We're looking at possibly a special hearing on the 13th and also on the 29th, which would be the Wednesday after Thanksgiving. And the way that would work is if we're get our housing element comments back and can get it done by the 29th, well, then we're done with that. But then we would have the 29th as a backup date in case we don't have it, or as a backup date for the Ag Enterprise Ordinance. So it'll be a little bit fluid. But we wanted to bring it up today just to find out if any of the planning commissioners have scheduling conflicts on, for example, Monday, November 13, or Wednesday, November 29. Do any of you know now your calendars and if those are problems?
I'm clear on both.
Anybody else know of issues?
No known issues.
Okay.
But, that's, life is going on in spite of the
That's right.
housing element, so I'll reserve the possibility of missing some.
I will have just finished managing a 3-day endurance ride on that Monday morning, and have promised staff that I'll be cranky and grouchy, but they said that's no different, so we'll see.
Relaxed. We'll be relaxed.
There you
You'll be
are,
endorphin,
worn out. Okay, well, is that it for the projection report? I think so.
So, yeah, Mr. Chair, I think we had also, the week of the 13th is a little fluid, but I think there was a conflict potentially with some of the other hearing bodies. So we were looking at the 13th and or the 17th, which is a Friday, but I think there was a conflict with one of the BARs on that date. So once we have a little bit more certainty on some of these dates, we'll be sending out an email to the commission, one, checking for availability, and with some dates that we would like to hold some special hearings on.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. Let's go on to public comment. And this is for public comment for items that are not on the agenda. So if you want to speak to the workshop topic today, which is the recreational master plan, then reserve your comments for that. On the other hand, if you have something else to talk about, and hopefully it relates to Santa Barbara County and to the Planning Commission, then now's your shot. We are limited to 15 minutes total. We've never come anywhere near that. In fact, I can't remember having much public comment at this time, but it's happened. And if somebody does have it, I'll try to hold you to 3 minutes, but we'll see. So all that being said, do we have anyone who wants to speak at this portion of the hearing? Anyone in the room? Do we have any requests to speak for public comment?
If anyone online would like to speak for this portion of public comment, go ahead and raise your hand. I do notice that we have someone joining us by phone, so it would be *9 on your phone to raise your hand. And I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay. Then we're going to move on to Planning Commissioners' informational reports. This would be where Planning Commissioners would give us a report on things that are going on in their district or some educational material they've reviewed and things like that. Do we have any Planning Commissioners' informational reports today? Going once, going twice?
Oh,
No?
really?
Oh.
Guys, I want to hear about Farm Day. I didn't go. I know Chair Parkman.
You didn't go?
I didn't go. What's
Well,
wrong?
you're supposed to go and report. Farm Day was very successful. It was a great turnout, more than ever. It continues to grow, and there's people from all over the state that come that have nothing to do with agriculture. So it is accomplishing its purpose. You know, one of the big things that Farm Day is doing also is the funds it does raise, right, are for continuing education for the youth. So they have there's a Farm Day van that goes to schools and tries to introduce kids to, you know, a seed and soil and maybe a crop. So, yeah, very successful. Everybody had a good time.
I think we're up to something like 17 sites this year, something like that, at least 16.
Yeah, and then we grew the area too.
Yeah, and it included, I think, 3 or 4 that were down in the San Ynez Valley, where I got lost, actually. But, yeah, and I think also, Mr. Wilson, weren't you part of a VIP tour of various department heads and other folks in the county that went around and attended it? So I think it was well attended by county government officials, which is good to know. Yeah.
Next year.
That's all right. Well, you've done it in the past, so it's good. I've seen you there.
Thank you.
Okay, now let's deal with the minutes of September 13, 2023. Who has comments on the minutes?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Okay, why don't you go ahead, Commissioner?
Thank you. Some minor, really more on English correction. On the last page, page 4 of the minutes, in the plan requirements and timing, which I think is important, we should add to P and D, where it reads in the first sentence, the applicant shall submit within 6 months of project approval the updated order abatement plan, et cetera. But I think it should be clear that it's 2P&D within that 6 months period. And with that change, I'll move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Well, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion's carried. Thank you for catching that, Commissioner Cooney. Okay. Let's move on to the Director's Report and Board of Supervisors hearing summary. And that'll be your report today, Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. Standing in for Director Plowman, who's out of the office this week. Just quick recap of items that were at the board, and before I do that, just concurrence to Chair Park. I did participate on a farm day tour. We missed Commissioner Bradley being there. But anyway, it was great. There was a number of department heads and/or representatives there on a tour that started in the morning, and we visited 4 to 5 sites. And so it was very informative, and it was good to be in the community and seeing the agriculture industry and what their business is about. And so that was a very good experience to be part of that. And then moving to the Board of Supervisors Director's Report. Last week, there was an item at the board, which was the change of owner-operator for the Lost Forest Canyon pipeline. That was approved on a 4-0 vote. Looking forward, the hearing next week. One item of interest is there'll be a presentation by the Office of Emergency Management in regards to El Nino preparation. Just bring that to the Commission's attention, just as we are part of the team that's collaborating with the other department agencies on preparation and looking in the past as far as recovery from the January storm events as well. So we're gearing up. We're looking at working with the CEO's office and creating an ombudsman person in our office to help property owners navigate repairing waterways and creeks that may be damaged in the upcoming El Nino event, if there is damage there, and/or helping them from the January storm events as well. So that's something that we're working on setting up in our office to help with that permitting process. It gets a little cumbersome dealing with multiple departments and state and federal agencies when you're working in the creeks and waterways. Other item on the agenda for October 3rd is the Strauss Wind Project. Currently, we did receive a letter from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services on Monday that meets the intent of the condition that was before the Commission on request to revise that. At this moment, it appears that it meets the conditions requirements. So the applicant, working with staff, may be withdrawing their application to amend that condition, which means that then the project and the request will go away and it'll revert back to the original approval. So that is what's going on right now. So we'll know more by the end of the week on how that unfolds. Looking further in the Board of Supervisors calendar as far as projects that the Commission may be interested in or have taken part in, we are trying to forecast the ordinance amendment package to be going to the board shortly following the Commission's hearing on October 4th, so in November. There's an appeal of the Garrity Garage conversion set for October 17th. North Fork Frost Ponds that the Commission has heard is scheduled for October 10th. So that pretty much summarizes the Board of Supervisors calendar at this time. So that concludes the Director's report.
All right. Okay, let's go on to the standard agenda. Will you read that item into the record, Mr. Villalobos?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The workshop is to provide information to the County Planning Commission and the public on proposed comprehensive plan policy and zoning ordinance amendments related to the Recreation Master Plan. The workshop will provide an opportunity for the public to provide input on proposed amendments. The presentation at the workshop will provide an overview of the Recreation Master Plan currently being prepared by the Community Services Department, proposed amendments to the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance to support recreation, and a proposed new chapter in the Land Use and Development Code to provide an incentive program to encourage recreation development and opportunities throughout the county.
Right. And I don't think this is the kind of thing where we ask about ex parte contacts, so we won't worry about that. Let me discuss how we'll proceed today on this. Last month, we had a long presentation, and if you haven't seen that, it's available on our YouTube archives. Go to minute 42 for the August 30 YouTube video, and you can watch that. Today, what we'll do is have a brief recap, and that's what Mr. Lindgren's standing up to start that off with. And I think somebody from P&D will assist in that as well. And then we'll move on to public comment. So that's really what we're doing today, is public comment. And I'm aware there's different kinds of public comment. We have people in the room. We also have people that will be there online or through Zoom. I'm going to try to mix them up. And I'm also aware there'll be different kinds of content for public comment. Some will just express, hopefully, appreciation or maybe disdain for the whole project, and others will talk about concepts and what they like and what needs to be supplemented or distracted or redacted or whatever. And many will be speaking to particular projects that they're involved in of their own, or their clients might be, and would want to describe what those projects would be and how they would fit into the master plan. So I want to incorporate all those things, kind of have a good flow to things. One thing I'm aware of here is this is a workshop, it's not a hearing, so the normal time limits are not necessarily applicable. So I'm going to give people more than 3 minutes if you need it. I don't want you to abuse it by taking like 15 minutes or 30 minutes. I'm also aware that some folks are speaking about the same topic, and if you are, I'm trying to group you together. And then finally, we have some agents here that will speak to various different properties, and I've discussed with some of those folks how's the best way to proceed with those. What I want to avoid is confusion. So if somebody stands up and says, I represent 5 different owners with 5 different projects, if they go through all that right there, it will then be confusing as to who owns what and what they're doing. And and it might mean that it has less impact. So what I'm going to do is allow people to come back. So you might come up and speak to your project, one project, and then go sit down and come back and speak to another. So those agents that are out there that are representing multiple property owners, kind of give some thought to, do you want to present a little bit on given projects? And if you're doing that, then you should kind of come back and forth. If, on the other hand, you have some policy comment that is where you have absolutely common comments for all of your multiple property owners you represent, then you might want to do that all at once. So you'll have to let me know as you go along. I hope that's clear. It's probably as clear as mud, but there we are. Let's go ahead and start with Mr. Lindgren. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Park. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, everyone who's joined us again for our second workshop on this topic. I'm remembering that this rotates so we can face everyone. This morning, we will be holding our follow-up workshop to the August 30th workshop that Chair Park had mentioned. During that workshop, I believe we were here for maybe three and a half hours, going through in some detail the Recreation Master Plan, and more importantly, for the Planning Commission, the proposed amendments to the Land Use Development Code and the Comprehensive Plan. So before I go any further, I'm Jeff Lindgren with County Parks. Our team working on these amendments to county policies is Assistant Director Jeffrey Wilson and Senior Planner Tina Mitchell. Fabulous working with them in collaboration on this project. Next slide, please. Oh, I jumped ahead already. Yes, so on August 30th, we had our first workshop on this topic. And just to remind everyone, the Recreation Master Plan is a document that will be going to the Board of Supervisors for their ultimate approval. As we were developing that document, we recognized that there were some implementation measures that needed to be included in that document in the form of changes to county policies and the comprehensive plan that could support recreation. We also recognize that changes to some of the zoning ordinance that could be made to support recreation across the county. So that's what we were bringing forward to your commission at this time, is to some discussion about those comprehensive plan changes and those land use development code changes. Next slide. A short recap on our recreation master plan development. It's a pretty standard planning document in that it looks at starting with doing some demographic analysis, looking at existing inventory of recreation facilities across the county, and beginning to develop a needs assessment of what is missing. Where do we have holes in our kind of recreation network? Where do we need trails? Where do we need parks? Are those parks and those trails accessible to the communities where they're located, or do people have to travel far away to reach those trails? All of those things are being analyzed in the needs assessment component of it. The plan also intends to establish a vision for recreation across the county, and we're also worked with the cities within the county, and we anticipate that the environmental document and the plan itself will facilitate the cities and the county being more successful in achieving grants from the state and federal level to support recreation across the county. I did just mention the programmatic EIR. This is a really important component of the Recreation Master Plan. It should allow projects that fall within the scope of that EIR to proceed relatively easily through the CEQA process. So removing a lot of time and cost for public projects and private projects moving forward. But today's hearing, and you'll hear more about this, is really about the amendments, the changes to zoning, the changes to the comprehensive plan that are being proposed to support public recreation countywide. And next slide. Oh, thank you very much. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Tina Mitchell.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Lindgren. Good morning, Chair Park and Commissioners and everyone here today. So over the next few slides, I'm just going to run through the basics of the amendments that we've been working with the Parks Division on in order to support the Recreation Master Plan. This was all information provided at the last workshop, but we've condensed it down for today's presentation just to refresh everyone's memory. At this point, we anticipate comprehensive plan amendments, specifically in the land use element and the open space element, to update policies regarding recreation so that they capture the current recreational needs identified in the Recreation Master Plan. And then, of course, there will also be ordinance amendments to the zoning codes, including the bulleted list on the right there. So this will include allowing more recreational uses and downshifting some of the permit requirements for recreational uses already in the code, creating development standards for certain recreational uses, which will help ensure that those uses are appropriately cited and designed. update and add new definitions to the code for recreational uses, updates to the rural recreation section, and then lastly, and kind of the big centerpiece of the discussion today, is the incentive program, which we have named the Recreation Benefit Program. So that's how we'll reference it. Next slide, please. So similar to the last workshop, we're going to focus closely on the Recreation Benefit Program, which is defined here on the left side of the slide as a voluntary program that provides incentives to project applicants that make a substantial contribution to a public recreation project as part of their private project. So what is a public recreation project? There we go. We want to clearly define that so that future applicants have an idea of what criteria they need to meet to become a recreation benefit project. So the right side of the screen is showing our working definition, and the idea is that a public recreation project should address a need identified in the recreation master plan. It should be open to the public, and it should provide services for the purposes of leisure, entertainment, or physical activity. Next slide, please. So recreation benefit projects will be broken down into 3 different categories shown here. And the intent of doing that is to create incentives for each of these different project types that best suit those project types. So for example, private recreation projects would be someone that wants to develop private recreational uses on their property. Housing projects is pretty self-explanatory. And the other private projects category, it's pretty broad, but it could really be anything that doesn't fit into the first 2 categories. So for example, like a commercial shopping center. Next slide, please. So we'll kind of go through those 3 categories here and explain again the incentives that we're looking at. So for private recreation projects, someone could contribute to a public recreation project and become a recreation benefit project, and that would open them up to the incentives listed there. So we're looking at downshifting permit requirements as an incentive, additional uses that are otherwise not allowed. So for example, the picture is a little hard to see, but a trailside cafe would be an example, a country inn or a country market. And then an increase in the intensity of use, which typically means additional units, additional campsites, things like that. So that's what that means. Next slide, please. So the second category, housing projects. These are some of the incentives that we're looking at for housing projects. Modification of development standards, reduction of parks fees, transferring maintenance of that public recreation component to the county, additional uses otherwise not allowed. We have some examples listed there. Increase in density, and just generally simplified permitting. Next slide, please. And finally, that third kind of more broad category, just non-housing, non-rec projects. We're looking at similar incentives, like modification of development standards, permit downshifting, additional allowed uses, increase in intensity of use, and then employee housing. That would be like employee housing that doesn't fall under ag employee housing that we permit now. Next slide, please. And this slide outlines how a project would become qualified as a recreation benefit project and move through the permitting process. So everything starts with parks at that first column there. And then the applicant will have to submit an application and review fee to parks for their proposed public recreation contribution. Project plans are expected to be conceptual at this point, and early consultation with planning will be available to help guide applicants on their incentives. Then we move on to the second level there. Parks will issue a qualification letter to the applicant if they determine that the contribution to public recreation is adequate. And then we move on to the third. The applicant will then submit their qualification letter with their planning application to planning and development, and will process their project based on the provisions for incentives that are laid out in the code that we're writing. Next slide, please. So this is that same project timeline that we looked at during last month's workshop. We're at workshop number 2, September 27th. And after today's workshop, we will be working to finish drafting the ordinance with environmental review expected to begin in the start of 2024. And then our kind of goal out in the future is to get back to Planning Commission hearings for these amendments in summer 2024. Next slide, please. So that leads us back to today's workshop, and the intent, like Chair Park said, was to have this second workshop to allow commission and members of the public some time to digest what we presented last time and formulate comments and questions. And we're really seeking input on what incentives would be valuable to potential projects, what issues you may foresee coming up during processing that we're missing now, and what, if any, concerns you have about the program or the ordinance amendments. And that's the end of my presentation. Our team is available for questions, and we look forward to hearing your input.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell and Mr. Lindgren. I'm glad you reminded me about questions. At the last workshop, we limited questions to questions from planning commissioners, and we encouraged planning commissioners to ask questions as we went along. And I'd want to encourage that today of other planning commissioners. So if you have a question that pops up, then let me know and ask it right then and there, okay? We didn't really have an opportunity to give folks in the audience or the public to ask questions, but you will today. So if you've got a question about something, you've got a pretty big team here that can answer that. And so fire away as you're called up for public comment. And as I said, people will have the opportunity to speak more than once as the day goes on. I mean, I don't want to be doing this at 9 o'clock tonight with 3 people going back and forth, but if you have a question, ask it. And if you have something else to present on, well, that might happen at another time. But here's your opportunity to ask questions. Okay. Well, Mr. Villalobos, how many people do we have on Zoom?
Mr. Chair, we currently have 3 speakers on Zoom.
Okay, and do we have their names?
Yes, Candace Steiner, Laurel Perez, and Madison Murphy.
Okay, I'm going to start with Mr. Murphy, if he's ready, because I know he's in New York right now. He's on a different timeline than us, and I promised to let him do that. Mr. Murphy, are you available? Well, we'll have to catch up then.
I am. I was trying to unmute there, Chairman Park. Can you hear me now?
We can, loud and clear.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you, Chairman Park and commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to add some comments here. I watched the workshop on August 30th, the master plan workshop. And I think the overall concepts are actually terrific, or potentially so. And as a landowner, we're keenly interested in engaging in that process and possibly taking advantage of some of the incentives. By way of background, I'm the co-owner of Presqu'île Winery, located on Clark Avenue near Orchid, and we have about 585 acres contiguous there. We've been exploring a guest ranch concept under the existing zoning ordinances, and we're in a due diligence phase on that. We also have some other buildings that could be repurposed for overnight accommodation, which this is particularly intriguing on a number of fronts. We have a full-on commercial kitchen at Presqu'île, which could be a trailside cafe, if you will. We could also certainly, we're keenly interested in the rural inn concept. We back up to Los Flores Ranch and could, in theory, provide trail access from Clark Avenue to Los Flores. We have equestrian facilities on the property and could also, provide horse riding access to Los Flores from our property as well. And so, in various conversations, we're keenly interested in this, and I really think that this is a terrific conversation. And I think the incentives for private landowners are spot on. And I just want to thank Chairman Park and the commissioners for engaging in this. It's an exciting opportunity for North County generally and for Presqu'Île specifically. And we look very much forward to engaging in a substantive conversation going forward.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Murphy. And we look forward to a safe return for you. Okay. Why don't we go ahead with folks in the room. Mr. Lozitas, are you ready to make some comments? Sure. All right.
Good morning, Chairman Park. Thank you for having me today. Sorry, I didn't sleep very well last night. My son is diabetic, and his numbers were all crazy, so I got about an hour's worth of sleep last night. Oh. He's 11 years old, sorry. I am very much in favor of the rec master plan. I've been working with John and Joan Hartman on this project since before we bought the property. My wife and I own Vega Vineyard and Farm on Santa Rosa Road, and we're excited to have a trail come through our property and connect everything through Santa Barbara County. I'm also a food and beverage guy, so trailside cafes and things like that are right up my alley, and that would be something we're very much interested in. On a side note, after the last presentation, when they said there was little to no recreation for Guadalupe, I had never been there. And on my wife's anniversary, I made her go with me. We drove through Guadalupe because we moved up here from Long Beach. I'd never been there. And yeah, we need some parks over there. So if there's anything I can do at Vega with my wife and I, where we could do maybe some fundraisers to help raise some funds and supplement what we're doing here to help places like that, we'd be very much interested in doing that. But yes, we are very much in support. And John, thank you for all your work. And commissioners, thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
I have some questions for this.
Yes, go ahead.
Is that how you want to handle it?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lozitas, and I really had a pleasure being at your facility last month. So you have a lot of activity going on there, and it was a winery, and there's a permit that allows you to have these kinds of activities. So what would be the most incentive for you, just not having to go through a major CUP, or what are you hearing from staff now that is a barrier to what you want to do now?
Thank you. That was in my notes. I just forgot all about it. The biggest thing for us is the permitting process, if it can be as simple as possible. My wife and I'm putting in 80 to 100 hours a week. It's a daunting project for us to try and develop this thing. And I don't know if anybody have been to Vega, it had been in disarray for a number of years. The original owner had passed, and it wasn't being maintained. So, the application processes through the county can be really daunting for small operators like my wife and I. So there's and I saw most of it being addressed here. If there's a way to make that really seamless and easy, and being able to not take as much time and energy and money, because anytime we take away from our business, it's time away from developing it and making it profitable. Because everybody knows the jokes about wineries, right? Best way to make $1 million at a winery is to start with $2 million. Well, I found that out. So. Well, so all the other things are needed. The restaurants and the housing and all those things are necessary to make this viable.
So my question is, did you apply to the county for something already? And your experience is that process ahead, as currently allowed for in our legislation, is the daunting part, or where are you in seeking a permit to envelop what you want to do?
Well, right now I'm waiting for this ag ordinance and the rec master plan to come through to be able to continue with the things that I want to do. My experiences have been in other projects,
okay,
unrelated to this, so I'm not going to bring those up. And I find that to be true for most modern and bigger cities. It seems to be a more challenging process to get through all the minutia of P&D. Whereas I've done work in Long Beach and Los Angeles, and it was very challenging to get all the permits. And then I worked also with the city of Lakewood, and we opened up in 2 months. So. That's our I think that's the biggest focus should be on how is that permitting process and how it can be made easy for people like myself.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lozitas.
And that's it. All right, thank you.
Yeah. Let me call on Claire Weinman next. There you are. Oh, there you are.
Good morning. I'm Claire Weinman with the Grower Shipper Association of Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties, and still gathering our thoughts through all of this process, but really wanted to emphasize that we do support recreation. Want to be really clear about that. Waller Park is the crown jewel for northern Santa Barbara County. You go any weekend and it's absolutely packed, and something that I enjoy with my family and is obviously of tremendous importance to the community. So really want to emphasize that, and also really excited about the new sports field complex that's coming to within the footprint of the city of Santa Maria. So definitely something want to emphasize that we do support that. I think we're remaining engaged in trying to navigate all of these different pieces. So the Recreation Master Plan, the Ag Enterprise Ordinance, the housing element, and how all of these pieces fit together. And of course, all the city jurisdictions, they're updating their housing elements and general plans and trying to figure out how all of that fits together. We're trying. And I think one of the things that I wanted to emphasize in terms of where we're coming from is we want to make sure, as our members who mostly grow fresh produce that's not cooked before consumption. So what we want is safe food and safe workplaces. We want harmony for all that are involved, and mutual success. So we recognize that things look different throughout the county, that agriculture looks different, that topography and what's important and what works looks different. So we just want to make sure that our members are also able to be successful and support those others in the community in different parts of the county too. I think in kind of trying to process all of this, I think we're still trying to wrap our head around some of these kind of abstract concepts or kind of one bullet points, and then kind of looking through, it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? So I think look forward to the discussion today. I really do appreciate hadn't thought about that, but I know Mr. Wilbrandt flagged it last time about drafting the ordinance before the EIR scoping. So just want to snaps to that. I think that's really important, and I think will be really helpful in understanding what we're talking about and how all of these pieces fit together. But I think we've communicated, but just want to emphasize that, for our members, things that are kind of limiting factors or binding realities for them include the FDA FSMA, it's the Food Safety Modernization Act, it's LGMA, which is the Leafy Greens Marketing Agreement, and also individual buyers have their own programs and requirements. So things like, audits for, kind of the big five or handful of big buyers out there who sometimes they align, sometimes they're more stringent. Often they're more stringent than some of the other requirements of these other programs that I mentioned, and those are realities to be able to sell products. And so we have separate comments on the Ag Enterprise Ordinance. I think the things that we looked at there included some of the composting, the overnight accommodations, and in kind of this context for the Rec Master Plan, I think really looking carefully, at housing, at childcare, the trails, because of kind of people tromping, horse poop, dog poop. Those are all things that we want to make sure are orderly, and then also overnight accommodation. I think just kind of looking at the list, I think those are the things that we want to look at most closely to make sure that, especially near kind of fresh produce, but also, we do have members that are wineries and vineyard management companies, and a lot of that includes night harvest. And so how are we, I think that's something that we want to look at carefully, that you're able to continue to perform those functions. I know that's been a source of conflict in other areas of the county as well. So things like noise and light, dust, and sometimes odors. So that's just kind of my quick list of things that we want to remain engaged in, and again want people to be successful, and I think just trying to wrap around what fits in which lane and just make sure that we're not accidentally running over each other. Thank you.
Any questions? I have a comment for you, Ms. Wyman, and I think you made a good point that, you know, growers, shippers are looking at the rec master plan, but also be looking at the ag enterprise ordinance, and they're on kind of separate hearing schedules, and they're at separate, different stages of preparation. I think it's important for you and others to realize that the ag enterprise ordinance is likely to be heard on November 8th, unless it gets kicked over. And what we anticipate by then is a draft ordinance, so you'll be able to see that language of the thing. A very important piece there are development standards. The Ag Enterprise Ordinance is based on some tables that they're tables of land uses that were attached as an exhibit to the notice of preparation that went out in January of 2022. So they've been out there a long time, but they're just tables. And what you need to know is, aside from, you know, how many campsites one might have on an Ag 2 property, is, well, what are the development standards, which are things like buffers and things like that. And I would imagine that would be important to the growers, shippers, both in the Ag Enterprise Ordinance and the Rec Master Plan. You know, we do have some mixed property uses up here. You know, people tend to think of all the row crop stuff as right there in its own area. Well, you go to Telephone Road and you got mixtures of all sorts of things. And what we think would be a difficult item is if you had a campground that's, you know, 10 feet from the border with a strawberry field. It's going to be hard on the agriculturalists. So I welcome your comments, and please come back on the 8th of November.
Yeah, I will add
something specific to look at.
13th, was that the final answer? Maybe the 13th? Definitely the 8th, 13th.
Yeah, or maybe even the
We'll save all the
29th.
dates.
It's
Okay.
going to be flexible, but we'll get there.
I'll update my calendars. Yeah, no, thank you for that. I appreciate that, and I think you know, definitely learned some, you know, lessons along the way from, you know, the Ag Enterprise Ordinance. I think from you know, lessons learned from some of the cannabis ordinance and project reviews too. So I think we're taking those, you know, trying to incorporate those lessons and trying to, you know, think forward in terms of, you know, what are you know, some possible ways that this could go. So that's where we're coming from, and the intent of our comments.
Oh, one last thing. This process of information gathering is not over. And what do I mean by information gathering? Something that's been going on for the last 2 or 3 years for both the Ag Enterprise Ordinance and the Rec Master Plan is an effort by many people connected with this whole process to gather information from property owners as to what would be incentives that work for you, or what would be problems that would be created. And we welcome that feedback continuously, including from growers, shippers, of course.
Thank you.
So,
Appreciate
thank you.
that.
Okay, let me call on Gelleray Macon. I know you're here. There you are. Now, I know you have a number of projects, so you pick which ones you want to speak about first, and we'll see how it flows.
Thank you for having me, Gelleray Macon. I do have general comment, and then I have a few projects. So I don't know if it's best to save general comment for the end, or
Well, maybe start with that.
start with general comment.
Sure.
Okay. In general, there's a lot of excitement around this program, and I was wondering if applicants had a way to submit now under a CUP, let's say if their use was allowed under a CUP. And then while the programmatic EIR was being prepared, that they could be considered a pending project or be somehow considered. And then when the rec master plan gets adopted, then they could either be switched over or that their project could then tier off of that EIR so that it saves them time overall in the process. It's just a comment for people that are really wanting to start the process.
Well, some have been waiting 3 years.
Yes.
Yeah, we know. Okay, that's a good point.
Okay, that's sort of it in the general comment. If you don't mind, can you bring up the San Ynez River site? Not that one yet. Please stop putting that on the screen. Okay. Okay. That's good. Thank you, Tina. This is, I started with this one because this idea started with this project a few years ago. The property owner that I'm representing owns this piece over here on this side of the 101, and this is the 101 freeway, and this is the border of Buellton and Santa Barbara, and the San Ynez River runs along here. That's helpful to orient people. So the landowner owns this piece, and then this piece, and then it keeps going further off the screen. We don't need to talk about that. And then Granite operates on this side, and then there's another property owner that also connects. And we've been working collaboratively, the 3 property owners, in creating a public trail that would run along the San Ynez River and would also connect to a series of other walking trails throughout the property, perhaps even connecting to Vega, which is over here. Yes. So it would be a real recreational benefit for this whole community, and then it would connect all the way. It gets a little complicated down here, but there is an option to either cross and go to the 246, which is up here, or continue down. There's also talk of sports fields for this upper area because it's in the flood zone, and so there's really not a lot of uses you can have, but you can have sports fields. So this is an example of a project that we've been thinking about, and the use that they are really interested in is an RV park, and what we would be looking for is a rural recreation definition that could help facilitate that, take out the low intensity part of rural recreation, or create a new definition for a public benefit project. Some hurdles are when these projects will trigger development plans. And so even if you downshift the CUP, you'd still be subject to a development plan, which could still end up taking a long time. So perhaps there's an allowance that those facilities or those uses don't get counted towards your development plan triggers, so that it can still be processed quickly in line with what the objectives of the program are. Another comment is, so one of the properties is about 1,000 acres. And I know we look at these as parcels. And so perhaps on these larger parcels, we can sort of look at them as like maybe 4 different pieces so that they don't get stuck with a limited number when they're like 1,000 acres. That maybe for up to 250 acres, you have this many as an allowance, and then you could get sort of without going through a subdivision, which we wouldn't want, for it to be laid out that way in the code, that they'd have allowance for more. That's it. Any questions? So I'll be back with more projects, but this is one I'm really proud of and been working on for a long time.
Any questions on the Santa Ynez River Trail?
Without exposing too much, sorry about that, Chair. So on your 1,000 acre discussion, right? And you're saying if you could look at that as really 1,000 acres of potential, but putting it in one spot. So would you take, if you split it into 250s to avoid the development plan, would that be you wanted to keep each of those areas completely separate, or would you want to combine potential rights into one area of the 1,000 acres?
Good question. We haven't gotten that far, but I can see how it would be difficult to put them all in one area. So maybe it would be split up by area so that the intensity doesn't increase in one spot.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair, I had a question too.
Yes, Commissioner Briley.
I thought the concept of, when you brought up the 1,000 acres, Ms. Macon, it was almost like a sliding scale. So for 1,000 acres, you would get, this many campsites or rec benefit things, and if you only had 100 acres, it would be less. It wasn't necessarily where it goes on the site, it was just intensity by acreage of the parcel, so that you don't have to subdivide it to get, I'm not even sure if that makes sense, though, now that I think about it.
So generally, the code does it by parcel, but on these larger parcels, you would still be getting the same amount of intensity as a parcel that's, let's say, 100 acres.
Right.
So just as an idea that perhaps you say 0 to 100, you get this much. 100 to 500, you get this much.
Yeah, like sliding scale.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I'm going to speak to that for a moment, because I think it's a good point to bring up. Under the Ag Enterprise Ordinance, even under the tables that have been out there for close to 2 years, it sort of works on a sliding scale for Ag 2 properties for a number of campsites allowed for a small camping operation. And it varies whether you're under 100 acres, under 300 acres, those kinds of things. And of course, the whole idea of the Rec Master Plan is if those landowners provide a public project or a contribution to a public project, they get more. That's the incentive. So if we're going to vary the number of campsites, for example, under the Ag Enterprise Ordinance, we would automatically need to do that in order to make for reasonable incentives under the Rec Master Plan. So I think it's a good point, and I think it's well taken. It'll be looked at. Okay, you want to come back for your other ones?
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Cooney, your light is lit. Did you have something? No. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Then let me go on to Anna Citron. Anna, there you are.
Hi, good morning, Chair Park and Commissioners. Anna Citron for Gaviota Coast Conservancy. So at the last workshop, Chair Park, you asked a question and specifically for some feedback on what type of incentives would be most appropriate for some of the large agricultural parcels that we see out on the Gaviota Coast. We also see, in Goleta Front Country, where trails are really badly needed.
Yes.
But the typical incentives don't tend to work all that well. So I've given that some thought. Look back over the Gaviota Coast Plan, where there was a lot of thought and focus put into this. And on the Gaviota Coast, we have a very sensitive environment. So making sure that any new uses are harmonious with existing agriculture, but also with the natural environment, are really important. And so for the Gaviota Coast planning area, there was an incentive program developed, but really only one incentive that was identified and that made it through the process, and that was the incentive dwelling unit. And that, to my knowledge, hasn't been utilized. So, really looking to other things. And I was pleased to hear Mr. Lundgren in the very beginning mention that that part of what will be accomplished by adopting the REC master plan is that it'll be easier to get funding to realize some of these projects. And on some of the large Gaviota Coast properties, particularly those along the primary coastal trail route, it is really that monetary incentive that seems to have the most promise in terms of giving landowners something tangible, while also allowing the recreational benefit to be realized without additional development, additional non-agricultural development that could have other impacts. So really looking to develop that side of things, and also working with other entities. So the Gaviota Coast Plan put a lot of emphasis into acquiring trails on public land. And state parks, Caltrans and the right-of-way have a lot of the map trail alignments within their jurisdiction, but we haven't seen them come forward with additional trail segments in the projects that they've pursued, state parks, for example, and Caltrans in the Gaviota Coast area. So one thing we're really looking to the county to do, and this, is related to this effort, but in some ways, what you need for this is already in the Gaviota Coast Plan, and there are action items identified in there requiring that the county, for example, enter an MOU with state parks and Caltrans and to look at establishing and developing trails and looking for funding for those. And so specifically Action Rec 6, Action Rec 5, those are things that we'd really like to see the county take more initiative in pursuing, even independent of this effort. But to the extent it can be integrated and further developed upon, that would be great. The Ag Enterprise Ordinance was mentioned, and we've been following that as well and submitted comments. And Chair Park, you mentioned the development standards. I just want to emphasize that it's really important to see those development standards and to see them with enough specificity early in the process, and Ms. Weinman spoke to this also. The tables in the AEO, they're a little vague, a little hard to understand how it would work on the ground, and recognizing there's sort of a chicken and egg, you don't want to lock in decision makers into specific development standards. So in this EIR process, looking to be specific, identify specific development standards, but also analyze a range of options so that decision makers in the end will have a range of options, but there will be the specificity for the public and for the environmental analysis to really make sure that's robust. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping around here. One thing that I've noticed just in work I've done countywide that is missing from the current comprehensive plan is an analogous policy to what we see in the community plans for protecting and preserving mapped trail alignments. So we have in the Gaviota Coast Plan policy Rec 4, protect and preserve trail alignments. We see this in the Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan and in the coastal zone. But for areas of the county that are not within those community plans, unincorporated county, there are actually no policies that I could find that protect mapped trail alignments. So to the extent, this process will be mapping new trails, and we hope it does, ensuring that there's the policy protection for those trails so that when projects come forward that are on a parcel where a map trail exists, that they have to protect that trail alignment and plan and provide for it to the extent that's appropriate in their project. So again, within environmentally sensitive areas like the Gaviota Coast, we hope that that there will be caution utilized, as another, Ms. Weinman also mentioned, ag looks different in different parts of the county, and there's a lot that I've seen in this presentation that's really exciting, and as a mom of 2 soccer players living in Goleta, I'm really excited about a lot of the recreational amenities that can be offered in the urban areas. But in the rural areas, ensuring that ag conflicts are minimized, and that these new recreational uses combined with the additional new uses in the AEO don't inadvertently subsume ag or create conflicts that end up harming ag. So I try to think if there's anything else here. I think that's it. So thank you.
Well, those are great comments, and I really appreciate the thought you put into them. And I'd like you to take heed to what I advised Ms. Weinman, that we're getting these development standards prepared, but if you have ideas on what should be in them or any of this, please don't hesitate to, right now, communicate what needs to be in them. The other thing is, I'm really glad you brought up the sort of history of the Gaviota plan. I'm going to add to it a little bit. It was worked on for a very long time by property owners and their representatives, and they came up with something they thought was really practical. And then it was sort of co-opted by government forces, let's put it that way, and didn't turn into what they wanted, and they were disappointed. And what we've seen is with the Gaviota plan, no one has requested to even pull a building permit on any of the so-called incentives that are in there. And it shows, one, you need to have reasonable incentive programs, but 2, and this goes to your point about funding, these ordinances can be as skillful as possible in designing incentives, but you're absolutely right. Some things are going to need money, and this is where nonprofits and other agencies come in, and the nonprofits can be very skillful in dealing with different agencies, identifying different funding sources, putting them together, and providing for acquisitions and things. So as important as this plan is for Santa Barbara County government, it's also just not going to work nearly as well unless there's that partnership with the different nonprofits that we have here. So that's really good. I appreciate it.
Well, as a nonprofit, GCC is eager to do participate in advancing these goals. So thank you very much.
We'll draft you in there. So with that, perfect segue into a presentation by Leslie Chan, Land Trust. Or I hope it is.
Good morning, Chair Park and commissioners. I think that was a really good segue to talk about the role of nonprofits in this. So I'm with the Land Trust for Santa Barbara County, and first want to say thank you for putting this together. I think the county really is in desperate need of the needs assessment and all of the work around REC, the Santa Barbara County Conservation Blueprint and the Land Trust Strategic Plan both identify additional REC resources really to provide for whole communities and the equitable access to open space, trails, and other recreational resources. I would say that one of the things that I think that there's an opportunity for here is to really think about the full regional potential of a rec plan, not only to deliver rec resources, but also to provide and support the community's biodiversity, agriculture, and climate resiliency goals. Many times rec projects can be delivered in a multi-benefit way that really incorporates these different community needs. I would say one of the things that when it comes to the development incentives, I think similarly to some of the things that I've heard, we're really looking to hear more about the specifics of that. And I think that we would advocate that the policies and amendments that go along with it really continue to incorporate equity and accessibility of the resources, and that the incentives and benefits that the private entities get are really equal to, or let's say the public benefits are equal to or exceed the benefits that the private entities are getting, and that environmental review and other types of community impacts of those projects really be looked at in a whole way. And I think being able to review some of that as the EIR is being prepared will help, I think for us to really understand kind of where that balance will be and what the process and procedures will be to review the private projects. One of the things that I know is that when public recreation projects are designed and developed, the community really has an opportunity to speak to different potential recreational uses, the balance of, let's say equestrian trails compared to bikes, compared to parks where dogs are allowed. There's some specific things that I know that the community is interested in being involved in really on a specific level when it comes to recreational resources. And similarly, I would think that as the projects move forward, it'd be important to continue to look at the whole community and make sure that the projects are being delivered in a way that is equitable, with a big need for recreational resources. It may be easy to say that the project checks one of the boxes, but looking cumulatively as those projects are developed and delivered, I think just making sure that the communities that have less resources already don't continue to be skipped because there's not a private project in those areas. Sometimes those economic incentives continue to perpetuate themselves, and that the communities that are underserved right now could potentially be outside of those economically incentivized private projects. I think that this is a really great project. I feel like the Land Trust has a role in helping to shape the plan, helping to deliver some of the regional open space and trail elements that we understand that the community needs. And so we're looking forward to continuing to participate. We actually do already have several projects in our pipeline of regional scale that either are recreational focused or have a recreation element. So making sure that we can kind of incorporate our vision and the community's vision that we understand for recreation in balance with biodiversity and agriculture and climate resiliency is one of the roles that we think that the Land Trust can play. And as you said, helping to provide and draw resources to provide those public benefits is something that we are interested in continuing, and to continue to partner with the county on continuing to promote whole communities that include rec and all of the other benefits of living in Santa Barbara County that we all enjoy. So I look forward to continuing participating in the process and being able to work together to continue to serve Santa Barbara County.
Well, this is sort of a be careful what you wish for thing, in that I think if this all works, we'll need organizations like the Land Trust to make it work. And it's good that the Land Trust has so many really good young people working there now, and a good crew, because we'll need them.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for the speaker.
Yes.
Hi.
Right.
Hi. Thank you for coming. I'm familiar with the Land Trust work. I've been a donor. I've done some of your events for a long time. I'm My impression is it's mostly open space and large, non-developed parcels. Has the Land Trust ever been involved in doing more active recreation in urban areas, like, you know, like a Gersh Park or like a Elings Foundation type of thing?
Thank you. So most of our work, and I think that as we see the future of our recreational resources that we'll work on, are really the regional open space types of resources, which I feel like are part of a big system. You know, they have a place in a system in addition to the neighborhood parks and other recreational facilities like that. We do have a history of providing more urban or neighborhood types of parks. We own Coronado Butterfly Preserve in Goleta that is contiguous to the Elwood Mesa Preserve. We've also worked in Carpinteria on the bluffs there, and in those projects, we've purchased the areas that have become, you know, they're still open space, but they're within those urban areas, and in those cases, we transferred the properties to the city of Carpinteria, who then provided the amenities, you know, parking lots and bathrooms, and though I think we've done 3 projects with them in that. So we do have a role in that, and we have some history with that. But I think when it comes to looking county-wide and kind of understanding so far what we've heard about needs, additional open space regional serving parks are missing from the northern communities. And so that, I think, is one of the roles that we think that we can play in some of these larger landscape scale resources.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we're going to take a break now until 25 of 11. Okay. We're reconvening our morning session of the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission hearing for September 27, 2023. Mr. Bozanich, are you ready to roll? Okay.
Thank you, Chair Park and members of the Commission. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on the Rec Master Plan. First of all, I want to just express my appreciation to the Parks Division for the Community Services Department, as well as the Planning and Development Department for their work on all of this. I also want to recognize Supervisor Joan Hartman for really giving a vision to a recreation master plan. I remember talking to her back in 2018 when about the time the state bond issue came out on the ballot for parks and statewide, and she thought we ought to be doing something of a plan here in Santa Barbara County. So I work with Armaderas Partners, and we're working with a couple of property owners here in the county for some opportunities to take advantage of these incentives. And so my comments today are not about the project, and I don't intend to talk about that specific project later on, but just I wanted to present maybe a couple of important policy and implementation considerations as we go forward. So one of the first things I just want to recognize is this is a real unique moment of public-private partnership for these incentives to work on private property, that the government would give folks some advantage is a really, really key moment. And I want to point that out because it's essential to recognize that the day where local government, counties or cities, can procure large land resources to do these kinds of things, that day's over. I live in the East Bay part of the Bay Area. We have the East Bay Parks and Rec District that was created before Prop 13, and they get part of the tax increment to buy property, to develop trails, to maintain trails. It's a huge organization, multi-million-dollar organization. That will never, ever be able to be done again in California. And so this is really the only way is to incentivize these kinds of recreational opportunities. So I just want to applaud Santa Barbara County for doing this. I think one of the key things that we need to think about is how do we deal with the shift in liability when you have a private property owner opening up their property for a hiking trail or an equestrian trail or any of these other recreational opportunities. How does then the local government and the community at large that's deriving a benefit compensate that property owner for the risks they take on by developing those resources and making those resources available? Absolutely essential. Because the things we do, whether it's trail, hiking, equestrian riding, bicycling, any of those kinds of activities, does have some risk associated with it. And so to expect a property owner to take advantage of the incentive without some indemnification for those risks is something that we're going to have to solve in the implementation of the Recreation Master Plan, I believe. The other point I would make is the Ag Enterprise Ordinance, and many of our speakers this morning have already mentioned this, but the interconnection between the Ag Enterprise Ordinance and the Rec Master Plan is really an important consideration. And I know they're on separate tracks, and you know, I think both of us are saying which is the chicken and which is the egg, and I think those are difficult to think through. But you know, in truth, the possible provisions of the Ag Enterprise Ordinance and the development standards that go with that really are going to incentivize people to make the kinds of commitments to take advantage of these incentives that we're talking about as part of the Rec Master Plan. So we've got to try to figure out some way to kind of bring those a little bit more in alignment, I believe, from a policy development perspective, and in order to do that. And then just the last thing I would point out is, as an active cyclist and hiker that's been doing that for years and years, I do think there's a needed coordination here with Public Works to connect these things to the public right-of-way. And how does that work? And so we don't have some of the conflicts, for example, that we're seeing in the trailheads in the front country trails in the 1st District and even in the 2nd District, which are creating burdens. Oftentimes, I realize there's a lot of differences between some of the areas we commonly are thinking about now in terms of more agriculturally zoned properties. But nevertheless, that inner tie between roadways, bike paths, and all these other amenities in going into the development of these additional recreational opportunities is going to be absolutely essential. And so thinking through that part, and I know Public Works is not here, I'm sure they're part of the process, but I would just point out that that becomes a vital link for our residents to be able to take advantage of these new recreational opportunities. So with that, I just want to say thanks for the opportunity to talk.
Questions, anyone? I have a couple comments myself. One, I'm very glad you brought up the issue of indemnification. I've noticed in speaking with folks about potential public trails that I've had this question at least a dozen times, a dozen landowners, how do we handle liability? And it starts with there are some very effective provisions of the civil code that protect private landowners for public trails, but they're not the full answer. Yeah. You can still get sued. You hopefully present that as a defense, but it's not the whole answer. One can say, well, get private insurance. The insurance market it rages in its inconsistency here in California right now. There's someone here in the room, I won't look at them, but their property owner who once advised me what they had done that day was write a $75,000 check for property taxes and then another one for liability insurance, and kind of like, well, now what's left? What do we eat on? And I get that point. And I don't think we're going to get any of these trails without a comprehensive indemnity discussion here in the county. Can we indemnify? If we can't, we're kind of just wasting our time.
And I think it becomes, especially from a governmental perspective, who are the deep pockets oftentimes, they do assume some risk, but detailing that out, I think in some kind of an agreement as part of taking advantage of these incentives and being able to actually develop these projects associated with the incentives is going to be key because it's just going to be not as it's going to be difficult to swallow, I think.
I remember I tried a 3-week indemnity provision trial in Santa Barbara years ago, and we can't repeat that process for every trail and landowner. And it's probably a good idea for us to be developing an indemnity document, looking at what they have across the country and getting feedback from landowners so that we're not addressing this question at the end of the process. But now, another thing I appreciate that you brought up, that with trails, let's get the parking, the bathrooms, all those things. And I think this actually connects with what Ms. Chan and Ms. Citron were talking about with social equity, that if we want everyone to feel okay to use these trails, they can't be in rich neighborhoods and elite places and far away. They got to be places people can get to and feel they belong there, and that they can take their little kids and go to the bathroom without going on somebody's rose bushes, things like that. So I think that's a good piece too. So thank you.
Yeah, and back to Ms. Weidman's comments about just food security issues associated with that. So just being able to provide that kind of infrastructure is really critical as we're thinking about these areas for opportunities for development. So thanks again.
Well, it's supposed to be a 30-year plan, I think, right, Mr. Lindgren? So we ought to do it right this time. Okay. Ms. Rosenthal, are you ready to go?
I'm more than ready.
Oh, my gosh. All right. And you have an entertaining video. Is that to be seen before or after you speak?
No, it'll be towards the end.
Okay.
Stuff,
so you tell us.
Anyway. But good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. Thank you and your hardworking staff for the informative presentation on August 30th. We appreciate all your hard work and our opportunity to provide comments and suggestions to the countywide recreation master plan. We understand that this will provide the blueprint for our recreational activities and amenities for the next 30 years. My name is Kathy Rosenthal. I'm a lifelong equestrian trail rider and long-distance hiker, a resident of the Santa Ynez Valley, and I represent the Santa Ynez Valley Riders and our coalition, Save Santa Barbara County Equestrian Trails. We are focused on current issues that will affect our future trails and support the county staff in identifying and carrying out clear and important policies to enhance safety on our trails for all users. We sincerely appreciate meetings such as this to describe our issues and our concerns, particularly as they pertain to equestrian trail riders, and we hope to find workable solutions. To start this discussion off, I'd like to remind everyone of the Community Services Department and the Parks Division mission, which is to provide community, cultural, and recreational resources that sustain and enhance quality of life for all who live, work, and play in Santa Barbara County. I'm here today to speak with you on concerns regarding continuing the horse culture in Santa Barbara County and for equitable trail policies in the rec plan that will ensure safe trails for all. I ask you to keep in mind the changing societal norms and recreation technology we face on trails currently. By that I mean recognizing people's lack of will to obey rules and for common courtesy, for example, ignoring leash laws, and more importantly, how this issue applies to the faster and often more silent users of our trail system, the mountain bikes, e-bikes, and other wheeled vehicles. As an example, the Live Oak Equestrian Trail is located on a historic portion of San Marcos Ranch, which at one time was the largest ranch in Santa Barbara County, and the equestrian trail was created in conjunction with the then County Parks Department and the Santa Ynez Valley Riders in 1989. Over 30 years of equestrian riding at Live Oak has cost the county very little in the way of time, staff, and money, with only one incident up until the time the trail was open to hikers in April of 2021. Many different types of incidents that require hours of staff time have been reported since the trail has been open to hikers, including motorcycle trespass and hunters that have discharged firearms and removed deer from the area of the trail. Expanding human intrusion to the north shore of Cachuma flies in the face of existing conservation plan policies specific to the Live Oak area. These policies have not been implemented thus far. We are hopeful that strong policies and process requirements for trail development and expansion will include adjacent community participation and lay out a process for appropriate use without loopholes. In my submittal for this meeting, my letter attachments provided a summary and comparison of equestrian facilities that surrounding coastal counties provide for the communities to enjoy. Under the auspices of a fair and equitable policy that promotes safety and enjoyable experiences for all, we also want to see movement towards similar equestrian recreation opportunities that are comparable with those surrounding counties. The data show that every county from Monterey to San Diego provides equestrian-only or equestrian and hiker-designated trails and at least one horse campground per county, while Santa Barbara County has eliminated all horse campgrounds over the years. Live Oak is the last remaining equestrian trail. While many of these counties subscribe to a multi-use policy, they regularly accommodate separate trails when dictated by the user type, topography, surrounding land uses, community needs, and other concerns to provide a fair, equitable, and enjoyable experience for all trail users. These surrounding counties manage to provide equestrian facilities such as water troughs, tie rails, and the like for equestrian riders at their campgrounds and trailheads that enhance the riding experience. Reestablishing the horse camp at Live Oak Camp and keeping Live Oak Trail as a safe and inviting equestrian trail could be developed as a revenue center at Live Oak Camp if it were kept free of fast-moving mountain bikes, fast-moving and silent e-bikes, and unleashed and untrained dogs that would threaten riders and the horse herd on the livestock grazing permit there. There is high demand for equestrian riding trails in our area, and a campground would add extra value to the thriving tourism in the Santa Ynez Valley. If thoughtfully planned, in consultation with the riding public and advertised once established, we envision the Live Oak Camp as an equestrian destination. With its rich rancho history and ongoing agricultural grazing, it is the most suitable place for recreational horse activities in the county and should be included as a public recreation project in the Rec Plan EIR. Live Oak continues to be popular among local and regional trail riders because it is safe for all ages to ride there, both people and horses. We believe Rec Plan policies should recognize that horseback riding and livestock grazing at this location are the grandfathered uses, and a Rec Plan policy directing the county to develop a comprehensive master plan for the Live Oak Camp area is necessary, specifically to continue historic, culturally significant uses that promote recreation and to address events driven by global climate change such as fire, flood, or drought, and identify ways to mitigate their likelihood. Also, the county must recognize that there are different trail intents in urban and rural areas, and if a trail is meant for transportation use or for recreational use or both. Wheeled means of transportation have become and are a future danger to equestrian riders as well as hikers, expressly allowing separate trails designated for 1, 2, or more user types depending on several factors, including topography and environmental concerns, as the county's trail policy and in trail design guidelines is imperative. However, there is a significant disconnect between equestrians' view of what a safe trail entails versus trail management agencies' view. The two views are miles apart. Recreation staff point out that most county trails are currently open to equestrian riding, so what's the problem? You may have heard or seen equestrian riders portrayed as elitists, individuals who want the trails for themselves and that horseback riding provides little in the way of exercise or health benefits. But with trail users that are fast, that can successfully ignore rules and can escape incidents that they create, are we the elitists, or should we be counted now among the most vulnerable on the trail? Typical trail riders are older, with most being of retirement age on fixed incomes. The fastest growing demographic of equestrian trail riders is female, in our later 50s to 70 years old. Some are much older than that, who are returning to horseback riding after raising their families, or they take it up as a new hobby in their retirement. We do our physical activities as part of horse care and preparation to ride. The whole body workout, believe me, is better than a gym. The ride is our reward for our hard work. We're not out for world domination, just a quiet, safe time, often with friends and family. Because of the rise of technology, speed, and extent to which mechanized travel has been allowed on all of our trails, equestrians have become the most vulnerable. It's quite easy to bully those who need safety the most. The trails we all enjoy started out as being horse trails, and trail riding via horseback remains a popular way to recreate, especially for those who cannot ride a bicycle nor hike to enjoy nature, but most of those trails are now defined as multi-use trails. There must be trails available for different ages, levels, and experience of both riders and horses. Young and new riders, older riders, and young inexperienced horses need a place to become accustomed to trail riding and to become good trail citizens without fear and without bullying. The next speaker will explain what horseback riding provides to disabled people, the young and the old, and the safety required for them to recreate. Under employment law, these are protected classes of individuals that warrant special awareness. Separate trails are the only way to provide recreation opportunities for those who cannot walk nor ride a bike and provides a safe place to train horses. We wish the county to acknowledge in the rec plan that if our riders are not safe or do not feel safe, are threatened, or must look over their shoulder their entire ride, then of course they're not going to ride on trails shared with those capable of speeds over 30 miles an hour. In addition, if there's no facilities, in particular horse trailer parking, how will we get horses to the trailhead to ride in the first place? We're hopeful that bringing safety concerns to light, then including specific effective policies in the rec plan that will provide concrete steps to ensure equestrian safety, provide access, and will stop rider attrition on our trails. The Parks Division accommodates every other kind of sport with safety and access in mind and listen to the concerns of those in the community. Equestrians are no different. To provide an example of what we face on trails currently, the following video and presentations will further explain or further demonstrate our equestrian safety and policy application concerns. In the video, you will see a mountain biker on Romero Canyon Trail above Montecito prior to the floods as an example of the high speeds that can be attained on various county trails and the danger posed to other trail users. So, Mr. Villalobos, if you could play that video for us. Thank you. You can see why equestrian riders and even hikers are concerned that the rec plan policies address safety, considering current and future technologies that facilitate speed and out-of-control behavior on our public trails. You'll recall from the August 30th Planning Commission meeting Susan Duca's summary of multi-use trails and what that means and doesn't mean. We are indebted to Suzanne and her research that discovered Santa Barbara County has never had a board-approved trail policy, multi-use or otherwise, but a multi-use trail policy has been put into practice without public review and board approval at equestrians and other trail users' expense. We believe separate trails for certain users are the only way to facilitate safe trails at this point. We don't want to see a loosely drafted policy that is open to interpretation, continually misinterpreted and misapplied. We do not want to see this happen again under the Rec Master Plan, nor do we wish all trail decisions to lie with a chosen few. Public involvement in developing new trails or changing trail use is critical. What we would like to see in the Rec Plan are policies that recognize the conflicts and severity of the conflicts going on right now on our trails between incompatible uses due to lack of trail management. You don't know what you don't know, but please listen to equestrians. We are in the field, and we know and what we are experiencing and what we need. Equestrian trail riding in this county is at a crossroads, and equestrians are down to one safe trail to ride. That is the Live Oak Equestrian Trail at Kachuma Recreation Area. Santa Barbara County has a historical horse culture that is world-renowned, and since Spanish times has produced some of the most magnificent horses, horsemen, and women that the world has ever seen. The lack of safe riding trails has caused severe rider attrition over the years and is killing our way of life and our sport. Current trail management is not consistent with the community services mission, as it does not provide trails necessary to preserve and practice our culture. Thank you for the opportunity to present our case today. The equestrian community and equestrian riders and their way of life is a Santa Barbara cultural treasure worth preserving, not destroying by inflexible and personal agendas of the loudest and most well-funded. At the very least, the policies must ensure Live Oak Trail remains a safe equestrian trail that honors our traditional horse and ranching culture and without any threats to equestrian trail riders and the natural and agricultural resources in that area. Thank you very much. I'm here for questions if you have any.
Let me ask one. I think you're a little modest in your accomplishments. What's your role in We Watch right now?
I also am the president of We Watch currently and stuff,
Yeah.
although I'm not representing them today. They did send a letter previously of comment, and they will be participating more in the Ag Enterprise Ordinance and housing element as we go.
But they're generally supportive of the Rec Master Plan.
Oh, very much so. Very much so, yes.
And just for the sake of the other planning commissioners, can you relate to us in summary form your experience with county planning?
Oh, I was a planning and development planner for many years. I did I actually did the Rancho San Marcos Golf Course. A lot of the project areas that are being considered for trails and recreational facilities under this plan. So I'm very familiar with that. I'm very heartened about some of the proposals that are going to be brought forward through the Rec Master Plan and also the Ag Enterprise Ordinance, as we never thought about them. You know, when I was in planning and stuff, it was always on how to conserve water, make sure there's traffic, enough room for all the traffic and that kind of thing. But this is a groundbreaking project, and thank heavens it's going forward at this time because it's very badly needed, particularly in light of the new housing requirements that the county is going to be required to meet. With that influx of population, we're definitely going to need more recreational facilities to keep them happy and healthy and make Santa Barbara, or keep Santa Barbara the way that we all enjoy right now. So,
well, thanks.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So I think we have Heather Barrett.
Mr. Chair and Planning Commissioners, my name is Dr. Heather Barrett. I'm a lifetime equestrian and a lifetime resident of Santa Barbara County. I'm also a retired physician, and I'm a disabled American. I have an orthopedic disability and also a hearing disability. I'm here to talk about safety for equestrians on the trail and the fact that safe trails for horses and riders have almost disappeared from Santa Barbara County. Horses are prey animals. They've evolved a flight response over thousands of years. If frightened or startled, they run or attempt to run by rearing. An individual horse may spook no matter what their training or desensitization, and horses are different in different climates and on different days. Bikes and loose dogs are dangerous to horses. When encountering mountain bikes, e-bikes, drones, or dogs, a spooked horse may blindly run down the trail or over the side of a cliff. They may injure a ligament or tendon or break a leg. This can lead to long-term recovery and enormous veterinary costs. In some cases, it will end with the owner asking their vet to kill their cherished friend. In fall of 2005, a horse died after a confrontation with a mountain bike on the Cold Springs Trail. This is documented in the chronology of user conflict in the Santa Barbara Front Country Trail System. And in this group, there were no trail riding groups represented. At this point, following many complaints of unsafe mountain bike behavior, the rangers advised that the front country be closed to bikes, and the bike trails didn't appear on the maps. After the death of this horse, experienced equestrians just stopped using the trails. Although our personal horses in our family have been desensitized to unleashed dogs, they are still vulnerable to aggressive dogs, such as the pit bulls at La Purísima who wounded a horse lately, and the husky cross who badly damaged my friend Dawn's horse some time ago. Mountain bikes are dangerous to riders and hikers. The individual in most danger during an unexpected confrontation is the person riding the spooked horse, not the dog owner or the bike rider. Horses typically weigh 1,000 pounds and up. When startled, they might duck and spin, rear, take off bucking, or run over a cliff. Common rider injuries are broken shoulders and wrists. Lungs can be punctured by broken ribs. Broken necks, brain injury, and death can also occur. Please see the attachment that Kathy Rosenthal submitted in her comment letter for a compendium of recent mountain bike and hiker or horse incidences throughout California. In almost all cases, mountain bike riders left the scene of the accident and were not held accountable. Multi-use trails are unsafe because cyclists and dog owners do not follow the rules. Well-intentioned public servants have informally designated almost all public trails to be multi-use. Some exceptions are the separation of bikes and pedestrians in Santa Barbara. The idea is that the yield triangle will keep the vulnerable users, hikers and equestrians, safe. Unfortunately, many off-road bike riders do not yield to the horses or the pedestrians. I have personally experienced cyclists refusing to yield even when asked to at both La Purísima and Las Flores. The former resulted in a heated argument, and the latter resulted in a woman being thrown from her horse. Mountain bikers watch the trails for wheel placement. They are not looking ahead for hikers or horses. They also acquire a great deal of speed going downhill. Horses are gradually being pushed off of public property. Lake Cachuma Peninsula used to have horse trails and a horse campground. Horses are no longer permitted on the trail to Bradbury Dam. Rancho Oso Horse Camp is closed. There are no horse camping facilities available in Santa Barbara County. Santa Barbara has miles of coastline, but no safe beaches for horseback riding. Henry's is too busy. There's no available parking and loose dogs. Hope Ranch is only open to residents. Elwood is full of loose dogs, bikes, electric planes, and cars, questionable parking, and signs forbidding horses from entering the beach. Pajaro Lane has a cement plant in the parking lot and large aggressive loose dogs. Separate days for different users on the trails sounded at first to me like a great idea. It would open up some trails for us. However, the idea of separate horse days and bike days depends on adequate staffing to enforce the yield rules and the leash laws. Alternate days are unlikely to be enforced. Live Oak is the only remaining safe public trail for horses. Live Oak is a unique resource for young horses, spirited horses, and riders in training. It gives disabled and older persons like myself a way to get out into nature. I hope that I have been able to elucidate why multi-use trails are often not safe for equestrians. It only takes one sudden appearance of a mountain biker or one aggressive dog to injure or kill a horse or rider. I encourage your commission to reflect on these safety considerations when contemplating official trail policies for recreational master plan. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Let's see, Marcia Nelson?
Any?
Hello. I am a lifelong equestrian, and
I have done a lot of things with horses. I have done endurance riding competitions, trail ride endurance competitions. I've done a lot of things at home. I have Horsemen's Hangout in San Ynez Valley, and I have done 20 years of summer camps with kids, and have one of my specialties is working with horse behavior and behavior specialists and really understanding their behavior. And just like humans, I mean, people can say, okay, horses, and you kind of put horses all in a same category, and horses are not all in the same category. You have your police horses that are the yes horses that have just learned how to deal with everything that comes along, whether it be a riot or anything else. And then you have your horses that aren't capable of doing that. And I run into all these different personalities, and that's my specialty, is rehabbing troubled horses and working with the owners and their horses and doing that. So in working with all of this, I personally, and I'm a veteran trail rider, veteran, training of the horses. We're riding veteran horses. We were in a competition in Cuyama, and we were supposed to be on trails that were without any other vehicles, anything for the duration of our endurance ride. And somehow a truck ended up coming around a corner as we were, and it's a lot of work when you're standing in your stirrups and you're riding and you're trotting and you're kind of doing what that biker's doing, but on a horse, and you're going up a hill, and suddenly a truck came around the corner right into our face, and both of our horses did exactly what these ladies were describing, reared straight up in the air, a full 180, big, long 300-foot drop on our right. We were very lucky that that didn't happen. The horses took off. We hit the ground, as experienced as we are, and it was hours before we found our horses again. So those things can happen in a second, just a second. So I'm here to speak about Live Oak Trail. And the interesting thing about Live Oak Trail is that Live Oak Trail is not owned by Santa Barbara County. It's not even owned by the state of California. It is federal land, and that became federal land because of Cachuma Lake, and we have a lease to use this property for recreational purposes. And that lease is between us and the Bureau of Reclamation. And we are to maintain, and the body that is to maintain this to the letter of the law is the Board of Supervisors. So I understand my point here in coming to you and talking with you is that you're working on a policy for trails in Santa Barbara County. And this is included in Santa Barbara County, but it is governed in a little bit different way. And so therefore, all of this, when this recreation master plan is done, it's going to go to the Board of Supervisors. And the Board of Supervisors is the body that has been given the job of making sure that the lease that allows us to use anything at Cachuma Lake is done there. Ironically, Live Oak Camp and the trails, the trails area is also leased by an independent rancher who has all of his horses and his cattle there, and they run loose on all of this property. Well, not loose, it's within all of his fencing, and he maintains his own fencing, his gates, the trails, he maintains the trails. He has a lease directly with the Bureau of Reclamation, just like we do. So therefore, we need to be in harmony with his animals, and the purpose of his animals there is for the good of everybody, because that's fire safety. That's why they're out there, is so that it is kept, all of the excess growth is kept down, and that works. I know we had 200 goats and sheep on our property for 1 week on our 10-acre property, and they cleaned off all of the excess overhead growth from last winter. So those animals are really important out there, and we have to be in harmony with them. And in the process of doing that,
there have been some incidents where when they added, let me back up a minute, because one of the points that's interesting is that this has been historically only an equestrian trail. That's all the signage, everything was equestrian trail, because we have been in harmony with the ranch animals because we're riding ranch animals. So we are a harmonious multi-use with those animals that are out there. We know how to close gates. We know how to make sure that we're not interacting with those animals. We don't bother those animals don't bother us. So that's really important. Then and in this contract that we have, the county or the Board of Supervisors, they are trying to get bikes and hikers onto our trail. And a lawsuit was brought up to say that this couldn't happen. And in the spring of this year, 2023, it was settled in favor of the litigants that the contract between us and the federal government does not allow the other users on there without an expensive or extensive EIR to study the impacts, and in addition to that, to get public input about it. So they bypassed that and just arbitrarily added hikers, and they were going to add bikers, but because of the pushback, they backed off on bikers. But it's still in the plan, and they have appealed it now. So my appeal to you, because this is an extensive process that's happening right now, by the time this recreation master plan goes to the Board of Supervisors, look at the hours, look at the man hours, women hours, time going into this, going to them. So I'm asking you to recommend to them that they drop this process of trying to change the Live Oak Trail and also the campgrounds. The campgrounds right there our trailhead, it's right there. I've been to that campgrounds many times for competitions. And we had that whole campgrounds area. Everybody would meet. People would come from out of town, from all over the place for the North American Trail Ride Conference to come to these things and to do this. And a few years ago, the price went so high to rent that campgrounds that people ended up not being able to do it. But with the closure of Rancho Oso now, this was our last. Now we have all of these other users that are out there. And since I've been there, since these changes happened 2 years ago, where they added hikers, and hikers are still out there. Even though the lawsuit was settled that said, no, you can't add anything without the benefit of the EIR, they have not stopped having the hikers go out there. The bikers are not out there. But so what we're finding is that gates are being left open. The rancher has let us know personally he's getting really tired of finding his animals in areas that they're not supposed to be in, because people who are hiking just don't get it. They don't even know how to open the ranch gates. They had to put a sign on there, say, lift the little lock on it, because they don't even know, But those people who were equestrians are, we're familiar with this kind of thing. And so it has proven in 30 years that we are harmonious with each other, and it works really well, and it doesn't happen. Now the rancher has also now moved all of his horses off of the area that people are on because there was just too much interaction happening, and he had to move them to a smaller area to kind of get away from the interaction that the hikers were doing. They were going up and trying to pet the horses, and they were trying to interact with them, and he doesn't want that. So that's kind of an issue there too. And and that means that the areas that the horses are not, now we don't have the fire safety going on anymore. So that's really important. Another thing, last week they had a whole Harley-Davidson group that was at the campgrounds. So they were going in and out and in and out, and where we park is as close as where you're sitting to where the road is, and that's where all the motorcycles were going in and out and in and out. So that was not a very good multi-use of the area. Even though they were polite, that they're still big and noisy and just going boom, boom, boom as the horses are all, tied up to the trailers and going out. And then I personally ran into hunters that were on their way out as I was riding in with their packs on their back, the gun in their pack sticking way up, and the young boy had antlers coming out the top of his pack, and I thought it was just a decoration. No, it was the deer. They had gone in and had hiked in, and they had shot the deer on the open area where we all ride, and they had cut it up and had it in their pack and were on their way out. And then as I was on my way out after they went out, I was pretty surprised to find big, huge mountain lion tracks on top of their tracks. So the mountain lion had followed them out, and I'm assuming it got out because there were no reports of any issues. But we went a whole different way out because we didn't want to be second choice if the mountain lion didn't get its first choice.
Are you getting ready to wrap up?
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm done.
I think it's good.
Okay. So that's what, I hope that you will, that you will advise the Board of Supervisors to not pursue changing the usage of this trail, because I think it's super important for us to have a place that we can go safely. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Incidentally, I was there when the Babes Ride Out event occurred, and from my observation, the motorcyclists were going at a pretty slow pace, and there were some issues, and I talked to Parks, and the head of the Parks operation was there in 5 minutes dealing with it, so I think Parks dealt with it very well. And by the way, I saw that mountain lion last night. Very large, it's a male. His tracks are as wide as my fist. And I'm glad to report my horse did not spin and bolt. She just stared at him, wondered, what is this, and walked slowly over there. But it just shows, that's a challenge at a place like Live Oak. It's a wonderful wilderness, but it's something that a lot of folks should see, and there's a lot to see. And you might say, well, I don't want to see a mountain lion, or maybe you want to go there and see one because it's a place to do it. And I appreciate the video at Romero Canyon. I used to live down there and conditioned my horse Remington up that. He was well known for chasing mountain bikers up the trail and trying to bite them to get them to go out of the way. And I had a incident where a rider like that going down went around a corner and skidded out right in front of us and touched us right there. And he apologized and said, well, and I'm making a point here, that's not just horse users that are in danger when trails are not safely used. I said, you're lucky you really didn't hit the horse, because you might have been stomped to death and thrown over the ridge. But what if that hadn't been a horse, but as a 3-year-old toddler? So this is not just an issue for horses, that there's not very many, or we're elitists, which is hardly the point, but unsafe behavior is unsafe for the bike users themselves, and it's unsafe for hikers and for small children. So it's certainly a science of trail safety that we need to get better at, and we will. Okay, Mr. Wilbrand, I'll bet you're raring to go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I'm going to probably repeat some of my general comments, and then I've got a couple of specific projects, so I'll probably do the hop up and down as has been described.
Do we have to do that? Because actually I have a time certain to leave by 2:30, so
then
I'm hoping...
I won't hop up and down, and I'm going to
I think we
hope
have
that
the
you
attention
stay
span
for
to
mine.
hear and just qualify your different thing. I mean, this is very important feedback. Thank you, Mr. Wilbrand.
Thank you all for this opportunity. I wanted,
and we'll easily be done by then.
I want to note, as I said last time, this is such a, I think, much better process for long-range planning than many of the processes that I've experienced over the last couple of decades, and especially the fact that the commission is having workshops and weighing in before ordinances are actually written, and that you're hearing from the public, and including landowners and people concerned about the land use, about what things are actually incentives and what things are actually useful for landowners, and what things might actually, like development standards, address the impacts from those useful activities. I think one of the biggest incentives for a landowner is if you can keep this particular staff working on this. The two Jeffs and Tina have been fantastic, and it would be wonderful to see this process come to some fruition before the five of you leave the commission. And I really hope that this is not a process like the Gaviota Coast process that takes, decades and multiple human lives. I've been working for, I think it's been 3 years now, on an advisory group that Commissioner Park pulled together. The group has included a number of landowners. It's included people from the public, those people that we often call stakeholders, but I really hate that term. I don't think any of them have really carried stakes to any of the meetings. Kathy Rosenthal has been one of the very helpful members of that group. I've been at those group meetings as a representative from the Vintners Association, and so largely looking at issues related to agricultural tourism. And I think a lot of what we're talking about here, a lot of the potential for recreational benefit from public-private projects is going to be in the area of agricultural tourism. And I would note for you all, the San Ynez Community Plan, which was adopted, I think, back in 2009, actually has a land use element section that, and I'm paraphrasing, but that says that the county shall, and it uses the shall word, support expansion of agricultural tourism. And here we are now, 14 years later, actually looking at perhaps some support by the county of expansion of agricultural tourism, but in a way that also is going to make our community an even better place to live, and that will expand on those things that we already have. For example, the horse culture, which created trail culture that you've heard so much about. And I look forward to helping make that happen. But again, I think it really has to happen in the way that this part of the process has been set up. And I hope that the Ag Enterprise Ordinance and the Farm Stay Ordinance can catch up with this, but please don't stop or slow this process down. If I could have the slide showing, the other one showing Sunstone at Refugio. No, it's it's Refugio Road at the San Ynez River. Well, I don't want to lose Commissioner Bradley, so I'll continue on. I think you probably are all generally aware of where Sunstone Winery is. It's at the San Ynez River on Refugio Road. It's interestingly right between the San Ynez Valley Equestrian Center and the river, the equestrian center being a public recreational facility with a conditional use permit. Sunstone is one of those interesting projects, and this may sort of help answer one of Commissioner Bridley's questions to an earlier speaker. Sunstone is a winery with a tasting room and actually a big, what they call the villa. And it all was permitted back before the current winery ordinance. And winery permits used to be more general, and they didn't include discussion or regulation of things that weren't regulated at that time. And as we've moved forward over the years, and with adoption of the winery ordinance, I think in 2005, and then the attempt to update it in 2016, there's been a lot of concern from planning and development about activities at wineries and at tasting rooms and at places like the Villa at Sunstone that weren't necessarily called out in that really old permit. The same thing is true, you asked about Vega, the same thing is true for Vega. And so the question then becomes, do those permits need to be updated, and what's the process for updating them? And the process right now for updating them, again, it's right back to the, takes dozens of years and hundreds of human lives kinds of things. And so I'm hoping that we're now going to have an update that will occur sort of automatically with some of the things you're looking at in the Ag Enterprise Ordinance, and a simpler update process, at least for those properties that are going to provide public recreation benefit. This is one of those. Again, we're right next to the equestrian center. I'm happy I followed all of the equestrian commenters, because what we're going to propose is a project that provides for uses, in fact, that we're doing there now, event activities that we've been doing there, some accommodation which is necessary in order to have agricultural tourism. And if we can get all of that, we're willing to grant a trail easement from the equestrian center that would go, and let's see if I can get my pointer up there. No, I can't make this one work, but it would go from toward the top is where the equestrian center is in this picture. It would go down generally our westerly property line. Great, thank you. Yep. Oh, there we go. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know if you all can see that. I actually can't very well.
Yeah, barely.
So I'm just going to describe it. It would go down the western property line, that little kind of, you can see there's a road there. It would go along the river, and you can see where the river is next to the property, over to the bridge, which is on the right or easterly side, and then back up.
That one right there.
Beautiful.
Do I have to do everything myself?
So equestrian center is here. This is what we call the villa. The tasting room is down here. We would go from the upper parking lot at the equestrian center down along this property line. We can then go along the river, or along our road, which is essentially along the river, over to Refugio, and then go back up Refugio and get back to the equestrian center. So it's not a huge long trail, but it's a new place to start. It's going to take a lot of the pressure off of Live Oak Trail. It's going to take a lot of the pressure off of other areas, and we think, again, it's a great place to start, including because we already have right next door the Santa Ynez Valley Equestrian Center. We've talked to the Equestrian Center, began having initial conversations with them. They agree there's some synergy between our activities, including weddings here at the villa and other things that happen here at the property, and things that they do at the equestrian center. And they also happen to have some nice big parking lots, which again provides support for activities happening here at Sunstone. So again, we think there's some great synergy potentially with that trail extension, and if we can use the parking lot here. And so I'm going to go back to a couple of specific issues that need to get included in here. One is, again, we've been waiting for several years before submitting applications potentially to update the permits. I think this is true of a lot of people. We've been waiting to have the Ag Enterprise Ordinance in place and to have the Farm Stay Ordinance in place and to have potentially this ordinance in place, because it's difficult to process when you don't know what the rules are going to be. We've reached a point, though, where we're actually going to go ahead and submit a CUP application. We've been urged several times to submit that CUP application, and virtually everything that we're proposing to do, in fact, I think everything we're proposing to do, we can do with conditional use permits under the current rural recreation provisions and the current winery ordinance. This all just goes back to that question of how long and how complicated and how difficult is the processing in order to get back here in front of you all. And there are going to be a couple of findings that need to be made for those rural recreation CUPs that we'd like to work through this process, and hopefully this process will catch up with our processing of our applications. In fact, I expect this process will catch up and we'll be able to be in the environmental document or have those potential impacts of our project included in that environmental document. And you all will have some either changes to the findings, requirements that make it almost sometimes impossible to get a rural recreation CUP approved, and to the uniform rule provisions that make it also difficult. We also, somebody mentioned the issue about liability and indemnification for the public using a trail on private property. Well, the equestrian center, while it seems like it's a public use, it's actually a private entity that owns that. And one of the things they've asked us to ask you about is, again, making sure that if they allow non-members to use this trail and to use the parking lot, that the county will provide for that indemnification. And they won't be able to open up unless you can provide that. And this great set of potential public benefits won't happen. I think that's going to be true of all of the trails that we're looking at through this program. I think I'm going to jump on to the next potential project. Do you happen to have, and I'm sorry.
Mr. Wilbrandt, I want to give you the opportunity to that, but I think what I want to do this afternoon, I want to call in one other speaker that's right here in the room.
Great.
And then we've got two, and then bring you back. And what we'll do is we'll probably take a break in about 20 minutes or so, but I think we'll finish this whole shebang by 1.
Ms. Bradley, if you're not able to stay, I would love to take you on a tour of the projects, in particular in the San Ynez Valley.
Yeah, and I think Commissioner Freeney needs to get out about the same time. So we'll make it work. But if you don't mind sitting down right now, I'd like to call Mary Hayden.
Great.
And then we'll do our 2 Zoom participants, and we'll go back.
Hello, everybody. My name's Mary Hayden, and my family owns and operates a cattle ranch in the San Ynez Valley, 8,000 acres. It's been in our family for almost 100 years. But first, I would like to speak to you as a private resident of San Ynez Valley. I live in Los Olivos with my husband and my son, who's now 17. When I first was surveyed for the recreational master plan, my focus was on sports facilities. I was very excited that there's the AYSO, the soccer people, there's Pony, which is the baseball people. As an only child, this is where my son got to hang out and have fun outside of school, and have really good coaching and a great experience of how to grow up to be a citizen and sportsmanship and work together. But in the San Ynez Valley specifically, the fields are very, very limited. It's at the San Ynez School, and there's kind of infighting between the school and Pony and AYSO, and I'm very, very grateful for those facilities, but we, again, going back to the last hearing that we had here, I was so excited to hear that number one was sports facilities, then parks, then pools, if I'm saying this correctly, and then down the line was trails. And so I'm kind of surprised that we're talking so much about trails and ag and not about sports facilities and parks and pools. Anyway, I do feel that there needs to be a huge focus on sports facilities, specifically for the San Ynez Valley. Was really excited to hear that perhaps on the 101 down there in Buellton seems like a great spot for sports facilities, but I do wish that there is a better focus on that. When my son turned 1 year old, or maybe 2, Sunny Fields was built, and it's a small park outside of Sawbang, and I will tell you that saved my life. It was a place to bring my son and all his friends could hang out. Otherwise, the only other really place is at the schools again, and it's a little bit awkward that way. I also believe both the sports facilities and the parks and the pools is a great leveler of socioeconomic communities. Everyone plays on AYSO. Everyone plays on Pony. We probably need to expand it to perhaps rugby or lacrosse or other sports that I don't have anything to do with, but want to expand that to that. So I do hope that there is a big focus on sports facility and parks, and also maintenance of the parks that currently are there. I think that's really, really important. So now, getting back to my ranching hand, I'm slightly concerned again, and was surprised to hear that there's been such a focus on the recreation, I'm sorry, it's the partnership, I forget what it's called, I have it written down here, benefit program. I do understand the need to have a program between public and private lands. What I've learned just sitting here and listening, that agricultural lands are very, very different, and agricultural businesses are very, very different. Where the wineries thrive and love having public people coming, and that's how their business grows, is having people on their property. Ranching doesn't. I guess we're kind of independent folk. And I will say that on our property at 8,000 Piece Ranch, we've got 3 county roads that go through it, and trash, trespassing, poachers, some dog issues, and honestly, drunk driving are our main issues. So having trails would be difficult for us in general. What is great on ranching, and for a lot of you who don't know ranching, how ranches are run, we have a herd of cattle, and they move from pasture to pasture. So when you look out on our pastures, oftentimes you don't see cattle and you just see open space and you go, what are they doing with that? Well, we're letting the land and the soil regenerate. And then the cattle move back on and then they move off. And that resting period is really important for the land, but it also can have other uses. So temporary events are great. So having week-long horse events. So endurance riders or San Ynez trail riders or the Santa Barbara trail riders or the vaqueros or the rancheros. There's, this history of horseback riding folk that do their week-long camp trips. And it would be great if we could do that with very minimal permitting. They're on the property. They use porta potties, so we wouldn't have to worry about, building toilets and all that. And then they're gone. And then the property regenerates. Same is true for running groups. A couple of years ago, we sponsored the Spartan race, and that was a big, big program, but it was incredible. There was people from all over California and the United States, and they were so grateful to come onto our property and have that opportunity to see the San Ynez Valley from on property. And then another possibility would be music events. So music festivals, again, where it's a temporary sort of thing, it's a high impact, and then they go. So those are my main thoughts, and thank you for listening.
Commissioner Farini?
Ms. Hayden,
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
what happened to Spartan? Why didn't they come back?
Well, we had some issues with permitting. That was a big one. They also ended up up at the Santa Margarita Ranch.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I hope you do come back on the 8th of November if we go forward, and because I think that so many of the programs that were designed into those tables for the Ag Enterprise Ordinance were with the ranchers in mind, and things that you would think were appropriate and provide an extra source of income on certain items. So it'll be good to hear from you there. And those are designed to be uses that you could have with relatively little permitting, zoning clearances and so forth, not CUPs, and that would not they wouldn't have the intensity of uses that might occur under the rec master plan, but they would not require the public contribution or the contribution to a public trail or something. So you wouldn't have a trail to worry about unless you wanted it. Right. But then you might have other things that would be a nice source of income. So I look forward to seeing you then.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bradley?
Just a question. Do you have an ag preserve on your parcel?
Not currently, no.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Farm Days, we did participate, and we had Meredith Hendricks as one of our speakers talking about the land trust for Santa Barbara County. Yes. And I'm sorry, can I also say insurance is a huge concern. Yes. We had looked a couple of years ago about having our own private like horse membership group where folks such as these people over here could like buy a membership and ride on our ranch, and our insurance said absolutely not. So.
Oh, by the way, hang in there, because Mr. Wilbrandt has a project he's described that has some more sports fields, so you should you sit there and listen.
Okay, no? Thank you.
We'll see. Okay, let's.
Could I just wanted to say one little point before I forget my.
Mr. Martinez.
Not to the necessary speaker, but that brings up an interesting point in regards to that the Spartan competition. I actually saw it. I can't say I competed in it because I'm nowhere near that, but recreation, we're talking about something that's continuous throughout the year, but sometimes recreation is a 1, 2, or 3 day event.
That's right.
For our community. And I just wanted to bring that point out. Thanks.
I think it's a very good point. Okay, we have some folks on Zoom, right?
Our first speaker will be Laurel Perez.
Okay.
Okay, hello, almost good afternoon, Chair Park Commissioners. This is Laurel Perez. with Suzanne Elledge, Planning and Permitting Services. Thank you very much for this opportunity to participate remotely in this workshop. And I agree with all of the previous speakers in our support for the proposed Recreation Master Plan and the related amendments that would provide important incentives for project applicants, including housing development applicants, to incorporate and provide community recreation on site along with much needed housing. And it is really important that and timely that we are studying this potential for public recreation and incentives for public parks in concert with the housing element update and new housing projects that are coming down the pike as a result of the housing element update. The county, we know has tried incentive programs in the past for other permit-related efforts with, honestly, varying success. And I think that the incentives that would produce the most benefit to the applicant and ultimately result in public access and community parks include the following. The first being the waiver or reduction of park fees, which can be substantial for housing projects in particular, and at a minimum, contributing the land value and cost for constructing public park space. That cost should be credited toward the park mitigation fee. I think this would go a long way in incentivizing private property owners for providing public amenities on site. Secondly, the adoption of objective design standards and consideration for waiving BAR review if the standards are met would be significant and substantial and hopefully help to result in public park amenities on site as part of private housing projects. Thirdly, modifying the building height. And I know that there are a lot of state measures that will allow us to accomplish this, but in your consideration of design standards, a modification of the building height, which would allow housing development to be condensed into fewer structures, providing greater area, land area for parks and open space would be helpful. Fourth, downshifting the permit review and simplifying the process, of course, would provide added benefits and incentives for providing parks and public open space. But last and not least, using the programmatic EIRs for both the Recreation Master Plan and the Housing Element Update to address traffic impacts and other environmental impacts that may result from community and regional parks in the locations that are presently considered for housing in the Housing Element Update would further incentivize housing projects that could tier off of these CEQA documents. Providing applicants with a certified EIR that lays the groundwork for a simplified or more streamlined environmental analysis when their projects are submitted for public review is significant and meaningful. And I know Gilleray asked the question about at what point can we submit our concept plans to make sure that there are certain project details that are analyzed, specifically traffic, I think is the big one, to make sure that we've got some sort of environmental certified analysis that we can tier from when we bring these applications in for review. I'm also interested in hearing more about the proposed qualification process, which would require applicants to start the process with an application to the Parks Division. This would be a new process for all of us frequent users of the permit process, so it'll be interesting to hear more about this. I think the effectiveness of this proposed process will depend on efficiency and application review by parks and their timely coordination with P&D staff. I think it can work well, but I'm not sure it might necessitate adding staff to the Parks Division to handle what I anticipate to be a pretty large influx of applications with respect to housing development in a timely manner. Also, once staff identifies the level of plan details and any technical studies that would be required for this initial submittal, our office would certainly welcome a chance to review and comment on the submittal requirements, as they will be important in understanding the level of effort that will be needed to commence the process. kind of switching gears here, I'm also here today because we are working with the Caird family on their South Patterson properties, which have been identified in the draft housing element for rezone to provide housing. And we're presently studying property constraints and housing concepts to meet local employee needs in anticipation that the county will move forward as proposed and rezone the South Patterson properties, which total approximately 100 acres. But of those 100 acres, about 20 acres are in the coastal zone, and that area is not under consideration for rezoning, which creates opportunity for public park trails within that area. And then an additional approximate 10 acres of the property proposed for rezoning is actually within the Airport Land Use Commission safety zone, which means it will not be available for housing because of the safety zone 2 restrictions on density. But this space could serve as an ideal location, 10 acres, for a community park. And we're looking at this as a real potential benefit to the public, and we're committed to providing public access and open space amenities on site as part of the housing project should it move forward. However, the intensity of use for this 10-acre space will largely depend on the Airport Land Use Commission's restrictions on density and use of within the Airport Safety Zone 2. So I encourage county staff to coordinate closely with the Airport Land Use Commission staff to study and confirm the level of density and uses that would be acceptable in these areas, which will also occur in other properties, by the way, targeted for housing and related rezones in this area, so that we can better understand the level of amenities and public park density improvements that we can provide as part of these housing projects. I think that covers it. Thank you all very much for your attention to this important matter and your time to this effort.
Ms. Perez, I have a question for you. And one, I appreciate your comments. You covered a lot of material and very thoughtful advice on how to progress with this. I'm just curious, the community park you speak of, would it be in communication with the bike path along the creek?
Yes, there's, Commissioner Park, there's no question that we have opportunity to connect the 10 acres moving southward, if you will, toward Atascadero Creek with a public trail. That same trail could run alongside Atascadero Creek and then connect to the Class 1 bike path that starts all the way from Las Positas and heads down Modoc and then heads on out to UCSB. So it'd be a tremendous connection for both bicycles as well as pedestrians.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Any other questions of Ms. Perez? Okay. Mr. Villalobos, we have another speaker, do we not?
We do have one more who's joining us via telephone. If you'd like to participate, go ahead and hit *6 on your phone. So this is for our telephone speaker. *6 on your phone to unmute yourself. And Mr. Chair, I'm not getting any. Oh, sorry. Here we go.
Oh, hi, it's Claire Weinman, just listening in via phone for this portion, but no further comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to take a break until 12:15, and I have only 2 speaker slips to finish up with Ms. Macon and Mr. Wilbrandt, and I think we'll be done for the day. So let's take that break, and then we'll work through those who are done, and then we'll be done. So I think we don't need to take a lunch hour. Is that correct, fellow commissioners? That's right. Good. Okay. Okay. Welcome back to our Santa Barbara County Planning Commission meeting for September 27, 2023, and we're now in our afternoon session, and we're going to resume with Ms. Macon. And then why don't you go ahead and finish all your projects, and then we'll have Mr. Wilbrandt, and I think we're done for the day. But if somebody else shows up, well, we'll deal with them. Okay, go ahead.
Hi again. I did want to say thank you. I know I mentioned it last time at the first workshop, but I do appreciate all of this effort and by staff, and everyone's been very thoughtful in this process. Tina, do you mind putting up, this is Dos Pueblos Ranch. I recently got engaged with the landowner, and they are interested in this program and how it could and participating. And I'd like to talk about what their vision is, and they're just excited about the potential. Dos Pueblos Institute, located at Dos Pueblos Ranch, has a vision of connecting people to the land. That is their vision, and enhancing humanity's vital relationship with the natural environment. DPI would like to provide environmental education through inclusive access and low-impact recreational opportunities for the public. In line with the natural and cultural resources stewardship policies of the Gaviota Coast Plan, the supportive land uses envisioned are a visitor center, public trails, overnight camping, and educational tours and retreats for the public to learn about regenerative agriculture, sustainable farming practices, and Native American culture. We look forward to working with the county, Native American representatives, and interested community stakeholders to bring this vision to life and be wise stewards of the land.
Did I hear public trails?
You did hear public trails, yes.
Does this mean like a coastal trail?
It could, potentially.
Okay, that's pretty big news. Okay.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing the ordinance amendments and what can happen. Okay. Last project that I'd like to talk about, last but not least, is if you can bring up, Tina, the Glen Annie Golf Course. I've had the privilege of working with the landowners at Glen Annie Golf Course as a potential rezone site for housing. And this particular property has a somewhat unique opportunity to provide a very comprehensive recreational component. They own and can control about 175 acres, which goes beyond the limits of the golf course that you see there. And the housing component of the project would be about 75 acres, so that leaves 100 acres that they would like to provide as public open space with trails, community center, active, passive recreation opportunities, and it would go across and around this area, and it would also include restoration of a large portion of the existing golf course, and it's even larger than what's on here, but it would go all the way through here, and then the vision is to include a loop trail that would go around the site and through the site. They've also considered a community pool that would be open to the public. And it's very exciting to think about a major community regional park that would be part of this housing development that would not only support the housing development, but the community at large. In addition to those uses, a child care center is being considered, and like a ranch market, something for the area, and maybe even a country inn. But it would be compatible to those recreational uses that would be part of the project.
The trail you described, what's the approximate length of that?
From our conceptual designs, we're looking at about 3.2 miles of trails. And it would include, that would be sort of like a walking trail, and then there is a potential of having a separate equestrian trail that would be a little less in length, but that would also be included as part of the project.
So this regional park and this trail, that'd be open to the public, right?
That would be open to the public, yes.
So, okay.
Ideally, there would be opportunity to connect to the Los Padres National Forest that is just north of the project, but it's a dream. We're working on it. One incentive that is really helpful would be the reduction in park fees. These public amenities are not going to be inexpensive, and so that would help. And obviously, we've talked about the liability issue, but that's a major concern.
I had another park question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You've actually got a couple of parcels here, right?
There are 5 parcels, 5 legal parcels. 2 of them would be for housing, and 3 of them would be for, actually I have that wrong. 3 of them would be for housing, and 2 of them, the 2 larger pieces, would be for public recreation.
So this would be an example of using one of those incentives we looked at on the 30th of providing the recreation. It's off-site, but it's clearly on-site in the sense it's right next to the housing project, right next to the community. It's available for everybody. It's just that you would take advantage of that opportunity to use another parcel that you have control of.
Yes, Chair Park. And I do recognize that it's unique that they have this opportunity to do that.
And you wouldn't otherwise be obligated to do anything with that parcel to benefit the public, but given these incentives that you see here, you would do that. So
it's a great opportunity for it.
Commissioner Cooney has a comment or question.
The reason I'm speaking up, in spite of the time pressures, is I've heard from many users of the golf course that whatever you do on the Planning Commission, don't take away the golf course. And so I may have misheard, but I thought one of the possibilities is that additional land would be used other than the map of the existing golf course to make up for the lack of the portion of the golf course that would be subject to housing. Have I got that right?
Commissioner Cooney, they've looked at trying to keep the golf course in some way, but there's just really no opportunity to do that with the housing and these other uses. The goal is to unlock this property to a larger population of people and have greater recreation opportunities than the golf course.
Okay, so yeah, I'm glad I asked because I didn't want the rumors to start flying that the golf course users now, and that portion of the public that might use it in the future have the concern that that facility would go away for golf purposes, and you're confirming that, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
very weak yes.
Yes, no.
Okay, thank you.
I don't like to say it, Commissioner Cooney, but yes, unfortunately, there would be a loss of a golf course, but it would be getting a lot more in exchange.
Thank you.
Okay. And Commissioner Bradley?
Well, we brought this up when I, met with you and the owners before, but I still am strongly encouraging the owners to figure out a way, even for a 9-hole course, which is not that big a space. And if what you're going to do is change out a bunch of community rec, when you could actually do a 9-hole course, which is affordable to a lot of people, it would make your life a lot easier in the approvals. And so I don't understand the math of the land. I don't understand why, with that kind of acreage and that sort of amenities, and then changing it out for a regional park, why that is so much better than keeping even a small portion for a park. So you don't need to respond, but I'm still going to push for that, because that is what the community's relied on for a long time. And if they're going to have to swallow that many units, they're going to want something that they remember. And as we know, during the 90s, when we had 3 golf courses being proposed at the same time, that golf contingent is a pretty heavy one.
Thank you, Commissioner Bradley. The topography and the environmental constraints of this site make it difficult to have the 9-course golf course and the housing, because we'd have to put that somewhere in the flatter areas, and that is where the density is going. So although we are envisioning 100 acres of open space, most of that is steep slopes, and we'll be able to fit in trails throughout it, but it's not usable for really development or other uses.
Look forward to your exhibits.
Yes, I'll be prepared.
Okay. Did you have anything else to present?
No, that is all.
Very good. Well, it's clear we're going to have to sweat some details. So that's, but that's what the process is all about. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
And then Mr. Wilbrandt, we're going to give you the last word, probably.
And I will try and make it very quick. Tina, do you mind bringing up the other, basically, Refugio Road at 154? Is that? This is Roblar Winery? Yeah. So, and this is, I think, a project that grows out of a vision that I may have talked to a number of you about, for essentially a big triangle connector trail in the San Ynez Valley that would include a trail along Highway 154, and then the ability to get back along Refugio Road to 246, and then, and so it makes a big giant triangle with the corner that has the park and ride, and also allows, if you cross 246, it allows getting back to the other project I talked about on the other, kind of the other end of Refugio Road. Roblar Winery and Roblar Farms are, let's see if I can, if you go along 246, this is Roblar, which then connects to Refugio here, and again would take you all the way back to by the YMCA and the high school. And so this property right here, actually it's this whole thing here, while it's zoned Ag 1, it's a little over 60 acres, and so if it were one parcel, it could have been Ag 2. It's a couple of parcels, but it's all in one ownership. And this owner is interested in doing some stuff with accommodations at the property, and would also be interested in contributing to get the trail to actually happen all the way on the three sides of that property, and then be able to connect hopefully to a trail that keeps going this way, and the continuation of the Refugio Trail that's already started for the first, I think it's probably about a mile from the high school down. And so, again, while you've been talking about Ag 2 properties mainly, we'd like to propose one that is big enough to be Ag 2 and just happens to be Ag 1. The other one, and this is a really quick one, and so if you want to put that little drawing that I had, this is one that I put in here for Commissioner Park because he's talked about small little parks as being potential projects. This is the corner at Alamo Pintado and Baseline. Downtown Ballard is right here. For those of you familiar with the area, the Presbyterian Church is right here. And this is a weird little parcel. The owner owns 10 acres on this side of the road. The road used to go across a bridge that was generally somewhere here and has now gotten bigger and is mostly over here. And so this little piece of property that's about 3/4 of an acre got left and got attached to the 10 acres over here. The county owns the road, owns this little chunk right here, but doesn't own this piece here. And the owner is interested in actually giving all of that property to the county and putting in some horse tie racks and there actually is a little kind of a driveway trail that's already there. So the public would then be able to have a place right in the middle of Alamo Pintado to stop. There's a park bench for the bus stop right here. Again, it's an easy walk if you tie your horse over here to then walk to Ballard Inn, walk to Bob's, walk to all the stuff that's actually in Ballard. And I don't even know what we would be asking for as the incentive. This is probably one that we would be asking again to be able to kind of do a look back, because we'd like to give this. We've already met with several people at the county, and we'd like to give this now. So kind of closing this whole thing off with, there are people out there in the community who really want to participate and are willing to do big gives if we can figure out the right incentives. Thank you.
Are you going to be addressing sports fields at all? Or?
You know, I was hoping the property owner's representative would come. The fact that he's not here, I would just note that there are a number of other opportunities to get that trail system that I just mentioned all the way along Highway 246 and potentially, at least a lot of the way along 154 back to Los Olivos. And there are a couple of big properties that also could meet some other recreational needs, in particular for the east end of the San Ynez Valley. And so with the right incentives, I think that could happen.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, and thank you. Do we have anyone else online or in the room that's ready to make public comment? I think not. Well, then I think we're done for the day. Yeah.
I thought the planning commission was going to provide some feedback. You did it during the meeting.
I think so. I don't think there's a formal action for us to take. We haven't noticed it as such. And we'll certainly be hearing about or considering the actual implementing ordinances and so on and so forth. But if any of the commissioners do have feedback to make right now, let's do it. I should have.
Just follow up with staff separately. That's fine.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to get up and stretch, and I'm going to take that opportunity to clap for the staff, because I think, I was commenting on this to Mr. Wilson yesterday, I think it was, that we're a county of about 450,000 people, and with the housing element and this stuff, we're looking at planning things that are of a complexity for a multi-million person county, and we've got them compressed into a matter of a few months, things that are more exciting that have happened in the last 20 years, and to have staff enthusiastically move into this and develop those skills and push it is, I think it's wonderful. So thank you very much. And I also want to include, aside from, of course, Supervisor Hartman and Mr. Lindgren and Mr. Wilson and Ms. Mitchell, the consulting firm Wood, and persons of Dan Giroir and Eric Leachman and others that have backed us up as well. They should be appreciated. Okay, thanks a lot. We're done for the day.
Thank you, Chair Park. We know you did a ton of stuff on this.
Oh, here and there. Okay. But I always have fun. Okay, thanks a lot, folks.